former judge. Okay. We had the honorable judge with us in the morning, and he gave wonderful tips to the students on elocution and debate competitions. We were also graced by all our trustees, and one of the trustees, Mrs. Maya Shahani, went on in detail to discuss the topics, and I'm sure the participants must have got a lot of knowledge and content. So with these few words, I welcome all the judges, and I would like to place on record my thanks to all of you, because without your help, it would not have been possible to have this particular event. And I know some of the Canadian judges have to leave early by 10 o'clock. So without 10 means the Canadian time I'm talking about, okay? It is 6:30 in Canada, in Toronto right now. So without much ado, let us immediately begin. And Dhruvi, I request you to admit the A team, A1, A2. Rishika, why don't you make a beginning? Rishika?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. With the permission of all the judges, shall we begin? We commence the competition. I would like the participant A, team code A, to start, unmute themselves and start.
Rishika,
The time will start.
Rishika, please go on telling the judges it is A, A1, A2. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So that there is no problem
Yes,
in
ma'am.
marking.
Sure, ma'am. The team code now will be presenting is A, the team A. Begin, please.
Thank you. The world is a reflection of your own acts. Greetings, I'm Code and I'll be throwing light on the topic Pandemic Within the Pandemic, Marginalized Communities. The word pandemic refers to an outbreak of a disease that occurs over a wide geographic area and affects an exceptionally high proportion of the population. The current outbreak of coronavirus may definitely be novel. However, age-old viruses have surfaced and are on a high rise since the world went under lockdown. And very much like COVID, it hasn't spared the entire world. Its prevalence in the 21st century is the living proof that human race hasn't come up with an antidote or just isn't willing to. By the term viruses, I mean violence, discrimination, tormenting of the marginalized. Now, the term marginalized is very subjective, but by and large, it constitutes women, children, poor, inmates, religious minorities, social minorities, sexual minority, etc., all of which are forthcoming focal points. It is no news that the current pandemic has given an economic blow to all of us. Because of the unpreparedness of this shock by the Indian government, the migrant workers from the city were forced to leave the city, walk back to the village, beg for food, sleep on the roads for no fault of theirs. Despite the elaborate instructions given by ILO, the rights of innocent children have been smothered. Economic vulnerability has forced them to step out of their houses in this unsafe environment, unguarded, to earn a penny or two. What is worse is that there was a shocking reverse. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are.
Yes. Okay. So what's worse is there was a visible reverse trafficking where the peddlers returned the kids back to those who had earlier sold to them, and those who are still trapped are in the worst condition: starved, beaten, fatigued. Apart from this, the orphanages and old age homes are running out of supplies and are struggling for meals even. There has been a sharp rise of about 20 to 25% in the reported cases of domestic violence around the world as per the UN. The unreported unknown. The many spine-chilling global illustrations have one commonality, that the survivors live this life of hell generally because the abuser is the breadwinner or that he keeps an eye on the victim every single minute. Perplexingly, there has also been a rise in the cases of rape and sexual violence in countries like India and Nigeria. What's worse is that children are still at the receiving end. Globally, racial, social, sexual, religious minorities have been brutalized. In China, Muslims are manhandled with a view to eliminate them completely. In Islamic Pakistan, Hindu Sindhis and Balochis are forcefully converted, and upon non-submission, they are murdered and dehumanized. In Kabul, a Sikh Gurdwara was gunned down. To the very recent Sweden riots. In our own soil, hate is spewed every single day on every single channel for the Muslims. In the Muslim populated area of Bengal, residents of the Hindu societies were beaten and shooed away. The list is unending even in these times. All of the illustrations are from the post-COVID era. Black community has struggled and battled racism for years, but are still being tortured if they speak for equality. Asian Americans were called names and bullied for the apparent belief of carrying and spreading the virus. Sexual minorities have been discriminated, ill-treated, and violated even in these times due to irrational reasons. Inside the prison, basic SOPs like physical distancing, COVID test, hygiene maintenance has not been complied with. After a lot of struggle, a blow by deaths, when the tests were done, thousands tested positive. The inmates are really suffering due to police brutality and lack of accountability. Had there been accountability, Jairaj and Phoenix in India would not have died. Had there been racial equality, George Floyd would have been arrested like a white person and not asphyxiated. Rodney Levy and Breonna Taylor would not have been shot. The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. With these words of Albert Einstein, I would like to conclude that the affairs have worsened the pre-existing shape, resultantly worsening the conditions of the marginalized, in itself creating a pandemic. The only way out was discussions, which has also been silenced, which is why I believe that we may have an antidote for the coronavirus, but for these viruses, I stand in doubt. Thank you.
This was participant A. Now I would like, I will request participant A1 to unmute and start their video. Participant A1. Yeah.
Good evening. Firstly, I would like to make a request. Can you just text after 4 minutes and 30 seconds so that I could become aware of the fact that my time is up by 30 seconds?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I would like to begin. Good evening, everyone. Today, my topic is, can consensual sex among adults be termed as rape? So firstly, I'll be telling you that how I'll be going through this topic. I'll be dividing my topic in 3 parts. Firstly, I'll be talking about the introduction and the general connotations in our society. And secondly, I'll be talking about various considerations that we need to take in our focus in order to determine whether consensual sex be termed as rape. And thirdly, I'll be summing up the issue and will be giving few suggestions for the very same. So moving on with the first structure of my debate, I'll be also be doing a stakeholder analysis with every aspect of my debate. So firstly, I'll be talking that rape can simply be defined as something that is a non-consensual sex. So we need, in order to analyze this topic, we need to understand the very fact that whether it over-criminalized sex or under-criminalized sex, and whether it should be termed as crime or not, when we need to consider that it is a non-consensual sex itself. And even if there is consent, is it being forced? Has there been any threat or coercion? All these considerations have to be taken into consideration. Moreover, in present times, the very common notion that we have today is that there is consensual sex, but we are moving in a society where there is unwanted sex. So we are in a society where two members, or you could say two parties, consent to a sex, but one of the party does not want to have sex, and because the party does not physically desire it, emotionally want it, but just because there are few societal or other obligations, and the one party has just to have sex with the other party because of some social and legal reasons, they just have sex. Even if they have consensual sex, can we term this as rape? It is a very important question at this point of time. Moreover, for this question to be answered, to be answered, we need a straightforward change in the sexual education, in sexual morality, and in the ethics of our sexuality consideration. So now I'll be talking about the two considerations where we can term a consensual sex as rape or not as rape, as you may deem fit in the end of the debate itself. Firstly, we have to take into consideration that even if a man is having a consensual sex with women on the pretext of marrying that woman, it will not be considered as a misconception of fact, as court has held in various cases itself. For this to be elaborated, I would like to say that there is a very prominent reason in itself. India is very conservative when it comes to sex and morality. Virginity is very prized possession of women. So having sex before marriage is something that women would like to flicker about. So court has time and again put ways and focus into a very important fact that a woman consent is vitiated as soon as there is a false promise to marry. So it is a very important notion when we talk that a consensual sex should be termed as rape or not. The second consideration now I'll be talking about is that the laws in India. So we look at section 375, which talks about rape, and it talks about penetrations into vagina and other parts of the women body. We realize a very simple fact that all the punishment and all the laws in India are gender biased. They only talk about women as a victim. But what about men? Don't we have gender equal laws, or do we need them now? Is a very important question. But why is it a question? We need to see a very important fact that women has been using rape laws as a vendetta. In order to analyze the situation, I would like to put forth this present situation that two people have sex with each other. That is a consensual sex. But when a relationship soars, a woman may use law as a weapon for personal vengeance or a vendetta in itself. So I'll be now summing up the whole issue in just few words and some suggestions. So there is a very important thing that has to be taken into consideration. That is a thin line between rape and consensual sex. Court have to not only examine this thin line, but also the various evidences, the intention. That is the very important part. The malified intention on the part of men, whether he wanted to marry the women or whether women has been using the laws as a weapon for vengeance or something else. So in our society, what we need more is not something to define these laws, but we need a strong outlook. Because I would like to conclude just by saying that our silence could be deafening in itself. Because if we do not speak, if we do not ask and argue and fight for our rights, nobody is going to come up to us. Because even if there is a
I
consensual
request
sex
team code A1 to wind up. The time is up.
So I would like to conclude by saying that there is a thin line of distinction between rape and consensual sex, and that has to be considered always while determining any of the issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like request you to mute yourself. I request participant A2 to unmute and unmute. Participant A2, are you there?
Hello, greetings. Am I visible and audible clearly?
Yes, you are audible. You may start.
Okay, ma'am, just a thing. I'm A2 and my topic is Unity in Diversity, Acceptance of Sexual Minorities. You may please start my time.
Yes.
As we mark the second anniversary of striking down of the draconian Article 377 in India and talk about unity in diversity in context of sexual minorities, we find the urgency to bridge the gap between legal and social acceptance. The court now needs to concern itself with a broader question: what is freedom in the absence of a formal set of rights and protections? Let me start with the recent National Education Policy 2020, which has allocated the Gender Inclusion Fund to states to ensure availability of bicycles and sanitation to transgenders and females for better attainment of basic education. But for adding foundation of social acceptance, gender education should have been introduced in the syllabus, either as part of the adolescent education program or as a general foundation course. Because for children of such tender ages, we cannot rely upon the society and their home to shape their views about the sexual minorities, as these places are saturated with gendered meanings and internalized homophobia and are very good at reinforcing them. The students must be told that there is difference between sex and gender. They should not be forced to bind themselves in the binary and should be encouraged to acknowledge the entire gender spectrum as normal. Moreover, stereotypes like only two opposite sex parents can foster a family should be debunked. Further, there should be state-sponsored advertisements both through electronic and non-electronic platforms like street plays to diffuse the entire notion of acceptance in society. The revisit and reiteration of the gender-neutral past is also very important, because though gender being an anachronistic term, the way it has been articulated in the early Indian art forms reflects two major things. Firstly, that albeit gender was represented but was never a matter of concern. And secondly, the representation of gender was never uniform. And when I emphasize this portrayal, because there was an incident which was narrated by Ma'am Menka Guruswami when she was talking about her experience in the courtroom. And she says that courtroom is a place where odds are turned into the events. So one of the judges amongst the panel asked the public prosecutor if he knows about any homosexuals. He replied in negation and said, "I am not that modern, my lord." But are same-sex unions really a modern phenomena? The reason why people have ingrained this notion is because they have not been exposed to the art and literature that reveals the pre-modern narrative around such union. Whether it was the Kama Sutra written in the 4th century AD or the graphic representation or sculptures on the monuments, they talk about same-sex unions but have been unanimously ignored. Moving ahead to the legal aspects, the recent Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Bill 2019 does not recognize the right to identify one's gender. It rather allows for a certificate to identify a person as transgender till they undergo a sex reassignment surgery, which, my friends, is very expensive and intrinsic. And the state-owned medical infrastructure is neither capable of performing them efficiently nor answerable in case of discrepancy. Further, they have to apply for another certificate to recognize themselves, and this is totally against the essence of the NALSA judgment in 2014. Transgender community is calling this bill regressive and paying allegiance to this concern. The law should address them before it becomes a law actually. Another concern which needs attention globally is the banning of the discriminatory legal defense strategy. The year is 2020 and we have celebrated an entire Pride Month. But amidst this global political movement, there is an equal trace of transphobia, where there are 40 states still in the US that consider panic defense as a legal excuse for committing acts of violence against the LGBTQ community. Panic defense are such legal strategies that argue that an LGBT victim's sexual orientation caused the perpetrators to go into a state of homosexual panic, justifying the violence that was done against them. This is high time that it needs to end on priority. Dear friends, the right to form partnership, spousal relationship, inheritance, employment opportunities, protection from gender identity-based discrimination, education, medical health services, life insurance, accommodation and housing, counseling, community centers, etc. are basic reminders to ensure inclusiveness, equality, dignity, and other old-fashioned fundamental values that each and every one, irrespective of our social and physical differences, is guaranteed of. Concluding my speech, I would like to present some lines from my self-written poem. Painted in the spectrum of rainbow, your pinks and blues cannot contain me. But all I plead is an identity of normalcy, not to be marked as
Kindly
others,
wind
but
up.
to exist
Inco
equally.
Day.
It is the canvas of my life and the colors of my choice. Do not describe me in your words, for I have my own voice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kindly mute yourself and stay in the meeting. I request team code D. Uh, I request Team Code D to unmute herself and start.
Okay, can you please tell me if I can start now?
Yeah.
Okay. Around 80% of India's population works in the informal sector. Sounds like quite a large number to ignore, right? But when the nationwide lockdown was announced on March 24th, we forgot to keep this number in mind. This led to a series of stories of migrant workers walking hundreds of kilometers back to their hometowns in rural India. For a moment, just try imagining how much of a tremendous task it must have been, having to travel for days together without food and water, under the scorching sun, and facing violence at the hands of the police. This sad reality points towards economic and social disparities, which become even more evident during situations like this. Therefore, we cannot be indifferent towards the plight of the marginalized communities. In fact, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had warned us about this. And I quote, "Indifferentism is the worst kind of disease that can affect people." On a wider note, the World Migration Report of 2020 has estimated that there were around 272 million international migrants in 2019, among which nearly two-thirds were labor migrants. More than half of these people lost their jobs due to the pandemic, which was termed by the International Labour Organization as a potential crisis within crisis. Did you know that most of the migrant workers in India have died due to non-virus related causes like starvation, financial distress, exhaustion, accidents, denial of medical care, suicides, and police brutality? Women and children are those marginalized sections of the society who have lived in fear for as long as time has existed. Quite heartbreaking, right? Because of the pandemic, social inequities like gender-based violence and child abuse have increased due to lack of security, health, and money. NALSA, the National Legal Services Authority of India, has documented more than 50% rise in the domestic violence cases during the lockdown. This pattern was seen world over, which led to the UN describing it as a shadow pandemic alongside COVID-19. Childline Recent Helpline received more than 92,000 calls during the first 11 days of the lockdown itself, which points to the fact that children, just like women, have become easy prey for their abusers during the pandemic. According to a UNICEF report, COVID-19 poses a threat to the future of 600 million children in South Asia alone. While there are already 240 million children in India who are living in poverty, this crisis may push an additional 120 million children into poverty. This means that there will be a rise in the cases of child rights violations like child marriage, child labor, and so on. Such is the magnitude of the situation. Furthermore, there were many instances of xenophobia, racism, and communalism which amplified during the pandemic. Many political figures in India, US, and UK have fueled conspiracy theories by first calling the coronavirus as a Chinese virus and then calling Muslims as the super spreaders of the virus. People of African origin were also subjected to a lot of discrimination. The situation had deteriorated so much that the UN Secretary General had to step in and urge all the states to act now to strengthen the immunities of our societies against the virus of hate. Another similar marginalized communities which bears the burden of social stigma are the members of the LGBTQI community. They have been oppressed since centuries. Outright Action International, an LGBTQI rights group, recently carried out a global survey on the impact of COVID-19 and found that the situation of the LGBTQI had deteriorated so much that food had become their biggest concerns of all. In other words, this means that they were being starved. Another group, finally the group which is never addressed, that is the refugees. India hosts more than 2 lakh refugees which have been neglected so much that there is no schemes available for them. They have limited access to the mainstream services and support on account of their tenuous legal status. Refugees International, a non-profit humanitarian organization, recently stated in a report that refugees were the most vulnerable human groups in the pandemic. Pandemic is a human tragedy, one that has exposed pre-existing structural inequalities in the world's healthcare and socioeconomic response systems, which are much more severe in developing countries like India. While the virus may not discriminate, its impacts certainly do. Are we doing enough to eliminate this pandemic within pandemic? Now that's a question we need to ponder over. The Human Development Report of 2016 submitted by UNDP has given a clear picture of this human-induced pandemic
which has mostly impacted marginalized communities, and stated that despite progress gaps, universal human development is attainable. Thereby, I conclude my speech by quoting UN. If the most vulnerable people are safe, everyone is safe. Thank you.
Thank you, King Code B. I would request King Code B1. B, please mute yourself and stay in the meeting. Request B1 to unmute themselves.
Yes.
You
Am I
may
audible?
start. Yeah, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Respected judges, my team code is B1 and I'll be speaking on the topic, can consensual sex between adults be classified as rape? When I first looked at the topic, I was wondering, how can a consensual sex ever be called as a rape? Because that is completely in contradiction to the definition that we all know of. But then when I pondered over it, I realized that maybe not all consensual sex are, cannot be classified as rape, or it is a legal sexual activity. We need to understand this in a manner that here we are supposed to talk about what is consent and how a consent is obtained. In my course of speech in the next 4 minutes, I'll be first talking about what is rape in a layman's term, linking it to consent, and then giving a few instances followed by a conclusion. To start off with, rape is an activity that is condemned all over the world, and almost every country penalizes this heinous crime of rape. As a layman and as a law student as well, we understand rape as an activity which is not willingly done or which is not being consented to. Now, when we talk about consent, we generally understand consent as a willingness to do something. But what we do not focus on is that how this willingness was obtained. We need to understand that there is a separate concept called free consent, which essentially focuses on this point. The point being whether this willingness or the activity to do something was given out of voluntary aspect, or it was coerced, or it was via blackmail, or any other means that was not required at that moment. But here, when we talk about, when we link consent and rape, we need to understand that few instances might come in front of us, which prima facie may look like it is a consensual activity and it may not deem to be called as rape. But there are instances such as marital rape, there are instances such as intoxicated rape, intoxicated sexual activity, and a sexual activity on the basis of blackmail. All of these may prima facie look to be normal, but they are actually not, and they are deemed to be classified as rape. When we first talk about marital rape, this is a topic which is not really spoken much about in India especially, and it is not being given due importance of late. We need to understand here there are 2 points that have to be taken into consideration. Firstly, here, in the Indian rape laws, we need to understand that the aspect of consent is revocable. So as to say that at one point, if a consent was given, it can be revoked at any point of time, and that has to be adhered to. But prima facie, when we look at certain instances, it may seem to be consensual, and which is why we deem such activities as a legal sexual activity. But we need to also look at how that consent was obtained and why that consent was revoked at that time and why it was not adhered to. We also need to understand in Indian rape laws that a consent has to be given before each activity. It does not mean that there's a lifetime consent given by the wife or by a woman in the question. We need to understand that all these things have to be taken into consideration to come to a point that a particular activity is not a rape or is a rape. Now, when we talk about intoxication as well, what we understand as a layman, when we think of consent, it is essentially a denial or a explicit denial to do certain act. But when we talk about intoxication, that person does not really understand the consequence of that act. That essentially does not mean that he or she is consenting to it, which is why certain instances like such, when we consider them to be a legal sexual activity between 2 adults, it may definitely be classified as rape if it falls under these mentioned aspects when we talk about intoxication or blackmail for that matter. And we need to look at these points as well when we consider all of this. To conclude, I would say that prima facie certain things might look very black and white, but we need to understand minute features within it. We need to look at the intricacies within it, and come to a conclusion that certain sexual activity is rape or not. That was my time. Thank you.
I request Team Code B to unmute themselves and continue. Team Code B2, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Please begin.
Good afternoon to the respected judges. This is code B2 and my topic is University in Diversity, Acceptance of Sexual Minorities. India perfectly demonstrates university in diversity, that is existence of different color, race, caste, gender, religion, custom, society, etc. Then we are having another human group, that is LGBTQ group, whose sexual identities, orientations, and practices might be different from the majority of the society. So now, why these sexual minority groups are not being accepted by a society? Well, despite of many reasons, there can be a true reason, that is the psychological effect of a society. Our society mean them as a curse. Why? We think they do not have the quality of like men or women. And which kind of quality? Quality to reproduce. Only on the basis of reproduction we judge them. Where the human being has gone, where our humanity has lost, we are cutting their feathers, not letting them fly independently with freedom. We are not accepting them. They are being hesitated, they are being bullied, they are being abused to come forward and express whatever they wanted to express. If a certain group of institution will know that there is a transgender, they will not allow them to get the education. Or if they will be getting education, they are not supposed to live in the hostels because there is no certain separate hostels for them. Have you all ever seen there is a separate washroom for them in public, or there is separate bed for them in the hospitals? No, because we don't even consider them nor even we care for them. Our society has not accepted the difference between sex and gender. What is sex? Two people are doing sex within their privacy, within their limits, for the satisfaction for their desires. But that is their privacy. No state, no government, no third person can do anything for them within their privacy. So on which basis does we correlate sex with the work profession and education? Why isn't this sex why isn't this work profession and education is not allotted, not awarded to the transgenders? And what is gender? I am a male, female, or a trans. It depends on me completely, whatever I wanted to express myself, because I am having my personal liberty and freedom of speech and expression to express myself completely. So now, let us take a comparison on the basis of majority of gender itself. Earlier, uh, it was said that girls were not allowed for getting the education. They were trained for the household works where boys were. But later on, girls were allowed for the education, but only for the primary education. But now, girls are not only getting the education, higher education, but also they are being sent abroad for the higher degree. So this had happened gradually due to the change in the mindset and mentality of the people. So the same thing is required for the transgenders also. We have to make them free. We have to treat them equally like other countries globally are doing. So we have to give them comfortability to come forward to express whatever they wanted to express. And the society has not still accepted them. So the duty of the society and the law is to accept them now. No alien thing will come from outside and accept them. So we are living with them. They are living around us. So we have to only accept them. And who say ki they cannot do anything for the benefit of society and the nation? Like women can do anything, we have accepted this, but we are not accepting transgender can also do anything for the society with their work profession, education, their knowledge, their skills, their talent, their passion, their interest. We have never thought
we have to think this. And what happened if they can't only reproduce? For this law has changed by the legislation 2019 that a transgender can undergo a sex change surgery, and due to which whatever the gender he wanted to express for himself after the surgery, he may, and state will definitely accept that. We are all having Rig Veda, which act as an evidence for
Screen has frozen.
Is it everyone, or at least I'm not able to hear her?
The technical issue is with everyone, ma'am. I'll just text you.
Can I continue with this?
Surely, your 40 seconds are left. We have only time for
Yes.
40 seconds.
Shall I continue with this? Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Shall I continue?
Yeah, please
We
continue.
know India perfectly demonstrate unity in diversity, not unity in uniformity. If we are accepted on the basis of diversified character, we are not claimed to be same, to be uniform. And if we are accepted on the basis of diversified character, then there must be an acceptance. There must be globally acceptance for the sexual minority groups also. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Code B2. I request Team Code C, if I'm audible, kindly unmute yourself. Team Code C. Team Code C, am I audible to you?
Yes, ma'am. Am I?
Yeah, you're also audible. Please start.
May I start, please?
Yeah.
Pardon, ma'am?
You may begin, please.
My team code is C2. Shall I start, ma'am?
I'm asking for Team Code C. Is there Team Code C?
Yes, I'm team code C.
Please begin.
Okay. Good afternoon to all. Little did someone contemplate that something as small as a virus would wreak havoc across the world's economy. On March 12, 2020, World Health Organization has classified COVID-19 to be a pandemic, and since then, the turmoil began. Long queue of men and women having their children packing their life belonging without even knowing what the future has in store for them is something which is important, and it is a picture that will continue to haunt us even after the disease has subsided. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has focused not only on political democracy but also on social democracy. Going by the definition of the term marginalized, it states that half of the people who are being represented when compared to that of the total society can be considered as marginalized, and if we are going by that means, then umpteen number of sectors can be brought under the garb of this definition. Little or no access to the minority community who are belonging to the tribal area, and their script is something which acts as a roadblock in reaching them and making them aware as to how to protect themselves and their peer group from being affected with the COVID-19. Many government issued notifications and other important notices are not not communicated to them because their languages are in English or either in the official language, and they are not even able to understand what is happening around them. The police force in our country is 193 is to 1 lakh, which makes it difficult to have a proper social security system, and thereby they cannot control the entire system to prevent the expansion of this virus. Different social welfare schemes which are being issued by our country, especially through the Ministry of Social Welfare and Social Justice and Empowerment, has not reached the beneficiaries even now. This is not in the case of India, but also in other countries like Nepal, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, etc. It is due to the intermediaries who are plying in between them. Very important thing to note is that the differently abled people were having a tough time during the lockdown and quarantine period because they were having a restriction in their motion, and also they were not even provided with the basic facilities of medicines. They were also having a difficulty in getting their normal health checkups to be done properly. Another community which faces the ostracization in the society is the Hijra community. Despite of the very progressive decisions of Supreme Court in Nazruddin Johar versus Union of India, we are even reluctant to accept themselves as a part of our society. The important survey conducted by Amnesty International states that about 70% of the total Hijra community has not received the proper amenities and basic facilities during this quarantine period. And a certain section of people were even victims of racism, stigmatization of the Northeast people, and also ostracization of such people from the society is a common notion in our system. Increasing situations of domestic violence cases against women and children is also something to be noted. Many women and children were subjected to domestic violence and also such type of atrocities that they were even not having proper redressal systems to get their grievances to be addressed. It is very shameful to know that the government had to go to the extent of promulgating an ordinance according to the Epidemics and Diseases Act of 1897, so as to protect the healthcare workers and also the other people who are associated with the health sector in order to protect themselves from the attack of the society and thereby to protect them. Those people are burning their midnight oil to preserve ourselves and also the society from the clutches of this deadly virus. It is high time to note that the notifications and notices of the government has to be issued in the local language as well as in the language of the minority community also. It is to be stuck in conspicuous areas where these minority community people can see, and also for proper officials has to be sent to them so that they can be aware as to how to protect themselves and their peer group from this virus. The differently able people are also to be provided with proper medical facilities and also the equipments so that they can protect themselves from this situation and not affect with their lives again. The Hijra community, the people who are victims of racism, and the women and children of our society has to be properly redressed, and proper redressal forums has to be set up so that they'll get a feel that they are to be home.
Kindly wind up. The time is up.
Okay, so and so that proper redressal systems can be set up. I would like to conclude by saying that if a section of our brothers and sisters are still suffering, we cannot once claim that we won over the COVID-19 war. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Code C. I request Team Code C1 to unmute. Team Code C1, am I audible?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Kindly switch on your video too.
Can you see me now?
Yes. Thank you. Shall we commence?
Just a second. Yeah. Can I start?
Yes.
Good afternoon, one and all. And today, the topic which is assigned to me is whether consensual sex between two adults can be considered as rape. To understand whether consensual sex between two adults can be considered rape, it is important for us to go into the jurisprudence and understanding of the word consent. Consent under the Indian Penal Code has been defined as something which is voluntary and which is given by a person who is of sound mind. Without soundness of mind, consent cannot be considered as a true consent. Consent should be without any fear and should be without any fear of death or any fear of death of their related person. So in this case, it should be without any misconception of fact. When I say misconception of fact, it means that when somebody is told that they are going to either marry them or going to befriend them under that pretext, you cannot, that in that case, the consent cannot be said as free consent. Further, the consent cannot be as also an implied consent. That is, through the actions of a person, you cannot say that consent has been implied. Further, in order to determine whether the consent is there or not, her past sexual encounters cannot be taken into consideration. Therefore, the courts, in order to make consent, the courts, in order to make consent a foolproof defense in cases of rape, have presumed that there is no consent. Further, there is a thin line between consensual sex and rape. A consent can be said as a true consent only when the person indulging in that particular sexual activity has the knowledge that what they are indulging, have enough knowledge as to what that sexual activity will consist of. Without the full knowledge of the particular sexual activity or what they are going to be indulged in, or when they are in a position to say, or when their partner wants a certain thing in the sexual activity, but because of the relationship between them, they are in a position where they cannot say no, then such consent cannot be considered as cannot be considered as free and voluntary consent. Therefore, theoretically speaking, when in a lot of cases, either one of the victim feels obligated to have sex because of the nature of the relationship. Therefore, nature of the sexual nature of the relationship also should be taken into consideration before determining whether before criminalizing consensual sex between two adults. Now, assuming the fact that consensual sex between two adults is decided to be criminalized by the state, I am of the opinion that it cannot be criminalized by two states when it is consensual, because it is a private activity, and the state does not have any jurisdiction over private activities of the individuals. It is and it does not harm the society in any way, and it is a protective sphere and the individual choice and autonomy of that particular person. If it is criminalized, then it would be manifestly arbitrary and unreasonable towards the persons who have been guaranteed this right under the Indian Constitution, that is under Article 19 and Article 21. If this is criminalized, then it would be unconstitutional unconstitutional in the court of law, because it violates their fundamental rights of choosing of sexual autonomy. This was also held in the case of Navteej Singh Johar and also in the case of Gursahani, which said that the individuals have right to privacy as well as they have the right to choose their sexual autonomy. Therefore, criminalizing this would be criminalizing sexual activity between two consenting adults in the garb of sexual morality through law would be considered as unconstitutional and would not be would not stand in any court of law. With that, I think that consensual sex between two adults who are of sound mind and are sound mind would be should not be criminalized, taking into consideration all the facts and circumstances of that particular case. Hello. Yeah. Yes, I'm done. Yes. Hello. Yes, sir. Hello? Yes, hello, yes, I am, yeah. Should I leave the meeting? Hello? Hello? What's behind the answer and start again? Pin code C2, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Can we begin? Hello?
Team code C2, you're requested to present.
Okay, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. My topic is Unity in Diversity, Acceptance of Sexual Minorities, and my team code is C2. India has been the very specimen of unity in diversity. But why is this diversity culturally taken pride of, but not sexually? Society is a tied-up structure, and all its threads are equally important. But the things have changed today, and it has changed for the betterment and towards the inclusion and acceptance of sexual minorities in the societal framework. 15th April 2014 is indeed a red letter day in the history of India, as it marks the judicial validation and recognition of the trans community as the third gender by the Apex Court in the leading judgment of National Legal Services Authorities versus Union of India. At this point, there is a pertinent question that needs to be answered. Why this battle of recognition? Delving deep into history, we find traces of evidences suggesting that people of the trans community have often occupied position of respect and dignity in the society, be it in the religious perspective or the historical context. Ramayana mentions one such incident. When Lord Rama was set to leave for the forest upon being banished from the kingdom, he humbly turned towards his followers and asked all men and women to return to the city. The Hijra community alone continued to stand there, not feeling bound by the directions. Impressed by this, Lord Rama sanctioned upon them the power to confer blessings. Hence today we have the concept of Badhai. Similar instances are to be found in other religions too. Historically also, especially during the Ottoman Empire and the Mughal rule, people of the trans community occupied position of respect in the king's court. Unfortunately, the things took upon an ugly face during the British regime in India, with the advent of the draconian legislation in the name of Criminal Tribes Act 1871, which deemed the entire trans community as innately criminals. After years-long battle of recognition, judiciary came to the forefront as a savior for the sexual minority, be it giving them the judicial validation as the third gender or doing away with the colonial provision of Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code and thus legalizing the same gender sex as valid. Following the footsteps of the judiciary, even the legislature did its part of the work. It enacted the progressive piece of legislation in the name of the Transgender Person Protection of Rights Act 2020, which came into operation on 10th January 2020. This said act contains several better provisions pertaining to the members of the trans community. However, the recent notification of the Ministry of Home Affairs pertaining to the members of the trans community and their appointment in the paramilitary forces is yet another reformative step. Not only nationally, internationally too, their rights are highly advocated and efforts are being made to incorporate them in the wider societal framework with the aid of several international instruments, namely Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UN Convention Against Torture, International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, etc., and especially through the Yogyakarta Principles. Hillary Clinton once said, "Gay rights are human rights, and human rights are gay rights, for once and all." This strongly signifies that Humanity cannot be in isolation from the trans community, and the trans community cannot be segregated from humanity. Denmark and Argentina are few of those countries which have made welcoming provisions for the members of the trans community and had made sex change surgery a legal right. However, sensitizing the society and making it aware of the daily challenges and sufferings that the people of the trans community face is a task that really needs to be worked upon. Moreover, with these small steps, India as a nation is marching towards achieving its goal of social inclusion and social acceptance of sexual minorities. Nevertheless, the need of the hour is to ponder upon the saying, did God create it just Adam and Eve? Thank you.
Thank you, Team Code C. I request Team Code D. Dhruvi, can you let in the Team Code D? D1, D2?
Yeah, Team D is in.
Thank you. Team, Team Code D, kindly unmute yourself. Team Code D, am I audible?
Hello?
Hello? Team Code D?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Please commence with your elocution.
Greetings to one and all present here. These times are tough, even tougher than anticipated. With growing unemployment and isolation, a sense of fear, anger, and vulnerability groups us all. Pandemic isn't a light word which can be used. It is even intense than an epidemic. Pandemic is something which creates a sense of terror within us. It is usually seen at the time of crisis that there is a sense of exaggeration in the lives of people, in the disparities which we already face, as there is scarcity of resources which are present, as well as there is fear in the mind of people. It is well said that any society is only as strong as those who are weakest amongst its sections, and to uplift the society as a whole, it is required to uplift the weakest in the society, and then only we can overcome the setbacks faced. The weakest in the society are usually those who are socially excluded. Those who are socially excluded are generally blocked from enjoying the rights, resources, opportunities in an equal manner as far as with others. To put it into simpler words, marginalized communities are those communities which are not included in the mainstream of the society, those who do not have equal power relations with the other social groups which exist in the society. The health and the economic challenges which came as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak created a pandemic within pandemic situation for all these marginalized communities, as they were already facing many social disparities, which were discrimination and social exclusion, which do not provided them proper opportunities and proper rights in the society. They are the ones who are struggling at the bottom of Maslow's need of hierarchy pyramid. Now comes the major question. Why do we need to talk about marginalized communities at all? What is the need of it? Firstly, marginalized communities are more susceptible to viruses. Yes, they do not have adequate facilities to get themselves treated. Once they are left untreated, they act as vector for this virus in the society, and then they spread it from one person to many, and further it ultimately leads to the community transmission of COVID-19, which creates a havoc for the society. Secondly, when we talk about the marginalized communities, they are further included and they are further made up of many segments which are even more vulnerable. For example, the women, the children, and the elderly. Women are those who are overburdened with the unpaid work during these times. They have to take care of their families, they have to earn bread for their family as well, and they are even expected to stay strong emotionally, physically, and mentally during all these times. Second comes the children. Yes, children are seen as the future of the nation. They are very vulnerable when it comes to the marginalized communities. Children are those who don't even get proper 2 square meal per day to fill their stomach and properly work during these times. Their core is getting even softened and more vulnerable to the diseases which are not of the viral nature. Lastly, I would like to say that the marginalized communities are not even aware of the specific knowledge. Yes, the specific knowledge which the medical fraternity has told us to follow during these times. They don't know the percentage of the alcohol which should be there in a hand sanitizer so that a virus can be disintegrated properly. These are the few guidelines which everyone should know. They are not even literate to this level that they know what is the use of a face mask. I personally have witnessed people who are barely wearing a face mask which is covering their chin, and they proudly say that they are safe from coronavirus and they won't get it at any cost because they are wearing a mask. Now, it is very saddening situation that they don't even know that coronavirus spreads through the nostrils and through mouth. So the main purpose of a mask is to cover the face and mouth. Now, this is the major question why we need to talk about marginalized communities. They are not even properly educated about the standards which are meant to be followed during these times. Further, now we need to come and talk about what are the ways through which we can help them overcome these setbacks which they face during these times, the pandemic within pandemic times. Firstly, India has created a well-established political democracy, but now it's time to work on the social democracy. Socially, we need to work on the segments of the society which are not equal and at par with others. Now, secondly, one fits all policy should be changed. The national epidemic bill should now become more inclusive and should talk about socially include all the
Time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Team Code B. I request Team Code B1 to unmute and commence.
Yes, ma'am. Can I commence?
Yeah.
Sex is such a big taboo in our country that and in the world that we can't even say the word sex out loud. What comes with such taboos? When we don't talk about it, misconceptions. The same comes when we say we don't need to talk about sex because we fail to understand what consent is, which is the basics. Just to give you data, according to NCRB, 7,000 cases out of 33,000 cases of rape were charged upon live-in partners and husbands. But when we say consensual sex, how can it be labeled as rape? Ever been in a long-term relationship? You promised to marry someone and meanwhile you indulged in a physical relationship and could not marry that person later. Coming to the point, if seen under Section 90 of IPC, consent is not such a consent if given under the misconception of fact. Here the misconception was to marry. So do we think that when both the parties have power and both the parties have the knowledge, the tendency of misuse, it increases? Here, the origin needs to be understood if we talk about the misuse of rape. So when the origin is basically the view of women who have sexual experiences outside marriage or premarital sex as tainted, because when you read a matrimonial ad, the girls need to be fair and a virgin. Now the virgin is really very important. Now in the context, it becomes literally spoiled goods when a woman ceases to be a virgin because of inducement that she will eventually marry the person and he reenacts. So it's a breach of trust, it's a breach of promise. So in that context, that is why it is also called rape. But taking into account Section 89 of IPC, wherein for defense to be established under this, the accused must satisfy that the person consented to take risk and in a relationship or a consensual sex, it does. Since 2013, there is this worrying trend of misuse of rape laws. Several courts have also pointed out, and I'm really worried if this trend continues and is not abated. And I'm sorry, when you're in relationship, a consensual relationship, after 5 to 6 years, you say that it was false promise. It is made how exactly allegation be analyzed. Though time plays an important role, but the circumstantial evidences should also be considered. But in the case of marital rape, again the concern grows that marriage is a consent. When you put a girl in a situation of threat and the girl starts to have sex with you, is that a consent? Undoubtedly no. The instances which are given are misuse of law, but wherever there is law, it is bound to be misused. There is a presumption in 114A of Evidence Act that when a girl says she did not give the consent, the court presumes that true. So the law always in the favor of the girl. So in that context, it's become more frightening for a man. It's a choice of two individuals. They have to have relationship. They want to get intimate. It's their private choice. The point is that if one person never intended to marry a person, but takes the garden path, there is never an intention. And that the other person in misconception of facts proceeds in a relationship, then the issue arises to be in protection of law. In such cases, the court said, and I agree with the bench of judges A.K. Sikri and S. Abdullah Nasir, there is a clear distinction between rape and consensual sex. I believe that the court in such cases must very carefully examine whether the accused has actually wanted to marry the victim or had a malified motive and had made a false promise to this effect only to satisfy his lust, falls in the category of ambit of assault. If the woman continues to have sex with the man despite remaining uncertain that it would lead to a marriage, she cannot charge the said man of rape. The individual who makes a choice to act after evaluating the action and their possible consequences consents to such action. I would like to conclude that same happens in marital rape too. Marriage is not a consent. Also, there is difference between false promise and breach of promise. Breach of promise occurs because of number of factors and cannot be confused with false promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Code D2. I request Team Code E to unmute.
I am D2.
Yes, thank you, D2.
No, I am D2.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Kindly D2 start comments.
Okay. So
Judges,
let us understand.
kindly note that that was D1 and now D2 is presenting. Sorry for the confusion.
Can I start?
Yes, now you can. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Let us first understand who are sexual minorities. Sexual minorities are those whose behavioral pattern or biological structure is little different from majority persons in the society. Now, when it comes to gender, people think they know everything about gender, either it's male or female, but they don't. Because not everyone is attracted to opposite gender, not everyone feels comfortable with the gender role they are living in. So we can say there is one more class of gender in our society, and that class of gender is the LGBTQ community, that is lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgenders, and persons who are still exploring their gender identity. Unity Through Diversity was a national health conference for LGBT people in New York in the year 2018. It aimed at uplifting LGBT people while promoting social justice, healthy sexuality, and violence-free living. Sexual minorities has been a subject of discussion since ancient to modern times. Rig Veda, one of the sacred texts of Hinduism, states, Vikriti evam prakriti. What seems to be unnatural is also natural. Anthropological studies gives historical and cultural report of how gender-variant individuals were honored as special, gifted, and highly spiritual with the connection to the deities. So why in this modern society we cannot accept that these sexual minorities are boon to our society? For example, we have Sri Gauri Sawant. She adopted a child of a deceased sex worker who was left all alone to be sold in the sex trafficking industry. So this section is providing helping hand to that sections of the society which are completely ignored. Sexual minorities helps to increase pink economy of a country because they constitute a distinct high spending consumer group. So citizens who pay their taxes, abides by the law, serves the community, should not be held at an unfair disadvantage solely because of their sexual orientation. So after all these discussions and awareness, we are able to witness that across the globe, the line dividing sexual minorities from the society, it's slowly and gradually getting blurred and their acceptance is increasing. Many countries adopted the Yogyakarta principle, which recognizes freedom of sexual orientation and gender identity as part of human rights. In India, homosexuality has been legalized and Transgender Protection of Rights Act 2019 has been passed. In Israel, access to surrogacy for same-sex couple has been granted. Same-sex marriage has been legalized in 27 countries. Spain is a nation that not only legalized homosexuality, but also allowed its LGBT citizens to serve in its military. This all has taken one step closer towards unity and diversity and acceptance of sexual minorities. Because while legal changes are an important step, much more is required for this community to be able to live without discrimination and with dignity in the society. For example, we can create LGBT-friendly workplace environment. We can construct unisex or gender-neutral washrooms. We can support local LGBT community. Schools can include LGBT topics in their curriculum and much more. And finally, I believe that this world is one big family and family accepts its member for who they really are. And who are we to judge a verdict which is already pre-allotted by the nature? We are famous because of our human nature, and it just takes one preposition to make us inhuman, to make us infamous. So let us convert our in into I-double-N and accommodate everyone in our family, because our world is supposed to be full of rainbows and sunshines. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Code D2. I request Team Code E to comments, to unmute and comments. Team Code E.
Yes, good evening. The COVID-19 pandemic, which some have dubbed as the great equalizer, has in fact ripped the veil of ignorance and exposed the plight of marginalized communities across the world. Rashid Shabazz of The Colors of Change has actually pointed out that when George Floyd spoke the tragic words, "I can't breathe," it stood as a stark reminder of both the respiratory illness that threatens our world, as well as the harsh inequality and discrimination faced by these communities, which acts as a chokehold on the marginalized. Now, what exactly do we mean when we say that the marginalized communities face a pandemic within the pandemic? Now, the pandemic has affected all of us in nearly every facet of life. Even today, months after the first cases were reported, the world still grapples with the reality of escalating deaths, a steep decline in economic conditions, threats to job security, and so much more, and even the reality that things might get worse. But on the same plane, however, marginalized communities face several added threats, both as a result of the pandemic as well as of several other negative forces which have historically and socially suppressed them, so much so that the impact of the pandemic is exponentially amplified on these groups. Take the case of women, for example, or sexual minorities, or even elderly people. These groups are now confined to their homes and are victims of oppression within the four walls of their own homes, as is seen in the case of the huge increase in crime rates against them, especially in case of domestic violence. Furthermore, we also find that these groups are further pushed back into economic and social dependency, thus negating all the hard-earned progress of the past years. We also see that the pandemic has brought to light the migrant community who has for so long lived on the fringes of society, ensuring the smooth functioning of their adopted migratory home. And yet now, they are viciously uprooted and flung back to their homes with no means of survival. And of course, when it comes to particularly vulnerable groups like scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, there is not even enough data for us to truly comprehend the double whammy that the pandemic has had on them. we find that there are several situations that adversely affect these groups. Their mental health is severely impacted. However, they cannot afford to worry about that. Lack of access to healthcare, discrimination, lack of equality, lack of access to justice when it comes to compromised hygiene, malnutrition, hunger, starvation, lack of issues with documentation, and so much more. All of these stack up one after the other and ricochet off each other, so much so that we find that this truly lends life to the term a pandemic within a pandemic. So then, what exactly do we do to meet this unforeseen, unprecedented, extraordinary situation? It is important to ensure that these groups do not languish and even perish in the wake of this pandemic. Here, the government needs to ensure basic needs to these communities through its proper implementation of the benefit schemes, as well as to ensure that post-COVID reintegration strategies lay special emphasis on these groups. It is also important to ensure digital literacy and non-disruption of education, because when the whole society makes a progressive march towards the digital era, these groups should not be further disadvantaged. It is also vital to ensure the access to justice. Furthermore, we find that a lot of social actors and state governments have stepped up in this regard. However, this is one situation that mandates a collective effort by society as a whole. The judiciary has also stepped in, as we see in the matter of INDRE, the problems and miseries of migrant laborers. However, and they have also evolved several practicable solutions which have to be at all costs implemented. At the same time, however, ultimately, it is vital to understand that migrant laborers are humans too, and it is a mandate of humanity that we aid them in this time and lend our helping hand, both as people with a voice stronger than theirs and also with the ability that we have as children of India. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Code E. I request Team Code E1 to commence.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Good evening to all. It's very pleasant to share my thoughts about the topic. Can consensual sex between adults be labeled as a rape? First of all, I would like to take your mind away to the great words of Maria Child. Law is not law as it violates the principles of eternal justice. Rape has been defined well under Section 375 of Indian Penal Code. One will be guilty of rape in the four formations as described therein. In order to convict a man, the act should be against the will and consent. So these two words are used interrelated. There is a fine distinction between them. Act done against will is without consent, but every act done against without consent is not against will. Anyway, if such sexual intercourse was happen with consent of victim, she cannot file against the rape, as IPC section 87 has declared consent as a defense. Clause 3 to 6 of section 375 of Indian Penal Code define one will be guilty of crime though the act was done with the consent of victim if such consent was obtained by fraud, misrepresentation, intoxication, and soundness, or girl was under 18 years. The man will also be convicted for rape even though the act was with consent if ever he was HIV infected and transmit the disease to victim. On the above cases, the accused will be charged for rape as the act cannot be said consensual sex because consent is not made free. On the other hand, the question arises whether the consent on promise to marry will be considered as free consent because women use this law as a weapon for revenge when relationship is broken. Pratibha Rani, Justice of Delhi High Court, said that women misuse rape laws as vendetta when relationship is shaken. In Dhruvaram Muralidhar Sonar versus State of Maharashtra in 2019, the Supreme Court held that there is a fine distinction between rape and consensual sex. Trial court has to properly examine the workers before the adjudication. If the man has intention to marry and later he changed the mind, it will not be rape. But if such a promise was made without any intention of marriage, it will be considered as a rape. The same has been held in the case Adhiraj Soni versus State of Chhattisgarh. The consent cannot be said true if it is shown that the accused has, from the very inspection, promised with no intention to marry, and it will be labeled as a rape. Here, the context of victim will also be examined here. In the case Deepak Gulad versus State of Haryana, were the sexual intercourse with a graduate who was aware of appellant ban. She was already married and tried to sex with the girl. It cannot be said that consent is not obtained by phone. In case of living together, there is no any question of rhyme as there is no any promise to marry. When we look at the international perspective, so many countries have to change the laws because even if the sexual intercourse was with the consent, it will be considered as a rape. Sexual workers are being assaulted by police and morality as well. They are discriminated. They are being discriminated on sexual orientation, whether heterosexual or homosexual. Sexual consent is an agreement to participate in sexual activities. So this consent should be freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. One can change the consent at any time, and if the other is still on such intercourse, it will be considered as a rape. Where one has already consensual sex and wish to do the sex with the same girl, another consent is required, or else it will not be under the purview of consensual sex. Here, both live together for 8, 9, or 10 years, and if there is something discomfort, she file against the rape and depart other. This is too much melancholic approach. They do not contemplate their future and the future of their children, as no maintenance is given because this kind varies from marital relationship. Here, it is apparent that rape laws are made for the security of women, but they misuse the same law for as vendetta for revenge, and the courts are compelled to examine the whole case here, and the real victim may be far away from the justice. I would like to conclude my words reminding the motto of Indian judiciary: even if 1,000 criminals escape, not a single man will be punished, not a single innocent will be punished. Thank you all.
Thank you, Team Code E1. I request Team Code E2 to unmute yourself.
Yes. Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Should I start now?
Yes.
Unless you live under the rock, you know that the right to love whoever you want is a battle that the people across the countries are fighting for. Approximately 10% of the human population identifies as LGBTQ, that is, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning. So let's get one fact straight. Many of those around us are not. In fact, wherever we go, we know at least some friend or family member who is definitely one of them. I feel the history of LGBTQ has been quite complex. One, because the society do not perceive them as norm, and second, despite the fact that all men are created equal, the homosexuals, they still have to struggle for real equality. At least 69 countries across the world, they still criminalize homosexuality, and several are being oppressed across the nation because of their sexual orientation. When I talk about oppression, let's discuss what happened in Brunei last year. Brunei brought a new penal code into action last year in 2019. And this new penal code basically targeted those who were involved in same-sex relationship. And probably the harshest provision of this new penal code was that it was punishable by death by stoning, 100 lashes by a whip, and lesbian sex is punishable by 40 lashes by a whip. I know, this is quite shockingly horrific to hear this in 2020. I feel in Brunei, people are terrified because of the fact that there exists this harshness of law, and the fact that there is some social stigma that surrounds homosexuality. On one hand, we have Brunei, and on the other hand, I also feel things are somehow going in the right direction, because initially there were almost 76 countries that criminalized homosexuality. And to go down from 76 to 69 in a matter of like 5 years is pretty impressive. Our country, India, it celebrated the second anniversary of the path-breaking judgment by the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court struck down the 158-year-old controversial sodomy laws, which basically stated that it was against the law to engage in carnal intercourse that was against the order of nature. This section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, it was essentially a colonial relic, and it was brought by the Britishers during the time of colonialism in the year 1816. It is also quite funny because the Britishers had the sense to make homosexuality legal in the year 1967 in England and Wales. We, for some reason, were holding on to it. I feel in India, the movement it has really found its voice in the last decade. For example, if 20 years down the line, if we see, there were not many people who were, and it was very difficult to find people who were openly gay. Even 10 years down the line, this case has spent a lot of time in Indian courts where this case was being battled back and forth, where rulings were going one way and the appeals were going other way. And then when in 2018, the case finally came in Supreme Court, there were a number of people who came forth and they said, I am gay, I am lesbian, and this is how my rights are being affected. Kenya and Botswana, they have activists in the court right now who are fighting for the fact that these laws are against their constitutional rights. Angola, it got rid of this law last year. Argentina had laws that are actually more progressive than US. So domino by domino, these laws are definitely falling and countries are reforming their penal codes. On the other end of the spectrum, there are also people who believe human race will come to an end because of this, and the fact that God has created mankind for further creation and evolution. We are 1.3 billion population of India itself. I don't think lack of population is ever going to be a problem. In fact, you know what is going to help? The thing that will help is more of adoption. And who's likely to adopt? Gay couples. The reason why all this is spoken is because there is definitely lack of awareness, and that is exactly why we need to sensitize more and more people towards this and the fact that homosexuality is not a disease. I feel that our culture, it needs to be a beautiful culmination of different communities, languages, cultures. That's what it is. It needs to be unity in diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, King Code E2. I request King Code F to please unmute yourself if you are in King Code F.
Good evening to one and all. My topic is pandemic within pandemic, marginalized communities. So marginalized communities are socially excluded people for different reasons such as age, mental and physical disabilities, economic status, access to education, or people living in isolated places or depressed areas. Despite the growth the world has seen over the past 30 years, 1/3 of the global population continue to live in extreme poverty. Communities everywhere are facing the problem of deeply rooted system of discrimination. The recent murder of an African American man, George Floyd, by a Minneapolis police officer due to the former being black is a clear example. Especially when we see during this pandemic long rows of men, women, children with their life belonging tags in their bags marching towards their village, not knowing where they will reach in the near future, is a clear picture that will continue to haunt India long after this pandemic is over. However, the novel coronavirus does not discriminate. The ability to understand the attack of COVID-19 varies from the rich to the poor, from the haves to the haves not. It is clear that marginalized communities are disproportionately affected, especially the women and the children of these communities. In several Indian states, we hear community workers and associates talk stories of how the sanitization workers, Safai Karamchari, migrant workers are Dalits or Adivasis. All of them, and even the manual scavengers, the garbage pickers, the ones who are providing aids and cleaning the hospitals and wards, have been given no proper PPEs or proper gear protection. Even we see that they're just being provided masks. They have not been provided an extra pair of gloves or plastics to keep themselves safe. Dalits and Adivasis are not just disproportionately affected by the war of COVID-19, but their difficulties, social circumstances are there in the way of their ability to recover. The examples are there throughout the world. in Bangladesh, more than 850,000 Rohingya refugees are living in overcrowded camps in Coswakes, where, after surviving the genocide attack, have no option of social distancing. Whereas in Dominican Republic, the country's public health is in disarray, where only 250 ICU beds are there in the whole country of a population of over 10 million. We still believe that humanity is alive, as there are many NGOs that are working for the upliftment of these communities. And they are working even during this pandemic. However, I would like to cite an example of the famous Bollywood celebrity Sonu Sood, who recently came with an initiative of Ghar Bhejo Andolan, in which he provided transport to many migrant family workers, where they were able to reach the place they have stuck to their home. However, what we can do, we as a person can come forward and talk and create awareness about these programs. We need to educate people so that not just today, but in near future, also people do not face, or these communities do not suffer these problems. As education plays an important role where we want these people to not face these problems. However, I would like to conclude my argument by citing a quote from the famous human activist Malcolm X. He said, "I have had enough of someone else's propaganda. I am for truth, no matter who tells it. I am for justice, no matter who is it for or against. I am a human being first and foremost, as much whoever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole." Thank you.
Thank you, team code F1. I request team code F1 to commence, to unmute and commence.
Should I start?
Yeah.
Okay. No man is good enough to govern the other without consent, and whatever is existing without my knowledge is existing without my consent. And so is the case in terms of physical and mental space. A very pleasant and bird-chirping evening to all. Today I'm here to put my point of view on the topic, can consensual sex between adults be labeled as rape? Basically, what is consensual sex? It's like an agreement to involve in any kind of sexual activity. Being involved sexually with someone, we need to know that the other person want to be sexual with us too. This is the main point to be noted. The other point to be noted, it's on what all important terms and conditions the two persons are giving consent to. Like they just want to have a sex, just a sexual intercourse, not future consent, just for marriage and not any other thing, just for fun, for need, friends with benefits, etc., etc. Consenting and asking for consent are all about setting up personal boundaries and respecting that of our partners too. Consensual sex between adults. Now, basically, who are adults? Adults are the persons who have attained the age of majority, that is 18 years of age, who are capable enough to have any kind of contracting. They can enter into contract and they are not barred from any kind of court of law. They are not disqualified. People who are drunk, high, or of unsound mind are not capable to consent to sex. Now, both people must agree to sex every single time, like for it to be consensual. The consent to prior sexual acts cannot amount to future sexual acts. Like if two persons have previously dated or had a consensual sex for any reason, that does not mean that the other person also has to be consensual sex again. In other words, each time two people become sexually active, each person must consent and be a willing participant. According to section 375 of Indian Penal Code, it states that any man who penetrates, inserts, manipulates to any extent into the vagina, mouth, urethra, anus, into the women, hurting her against the will without a consent can amount to rape. Then, according to Sexual Offences Act 2003,
a person committing a crime means that he is to any extent penetrates into her vagina, anus, urethra without her consent or without reasonably believing that she has been consented. To accuse a man of rape, it is necessary to establish that at the very inception of making a promise to marry, he did not really entertain. It was on his behalf just a mere hoax. Like, if the person is giving a consent and he is not having the intention of doing so, then he's been exculpated from the ambit of section 376 of IPC. Then having a consensual sex with a woman and not having a particular intention is just a misconception of fact, and the physical acknowledged consent between two persons cannot be labeled as rape. Two persons who are living in a live-in relationship cannot be declared sex as a rape. Okay, then coming to the recent judgment of Supreme Court in April 2019, a court in the southern state of Karnataka freed a man on bail, giving that a woman cannot be laid a man who she is educated enough, having a premarital status, and after being relationship is over, she cannot directly claim the person into the jail and cannot send the person into the jail. Suppose if two people are dating or previously had a sex on Saturday night and again want to have on Sunday, then the person should have a consent of a partner or his partner again and again. Having consent one time cannot amount to have sexual intercourse again and again without consent. We begin a sexual encounter, and if at the middle of the encounter other person does not want to continue it, at that time forward that the sex can be said not to be consensual. Malified intention, if the person had a clandestine motive, then it is clear case of rape. Acknowledged consensual physical relationship cannot be claimed as rape. Okay, I would like to say, being a law student, that many amendments has been passed, and amendments claim that in 2013
F1, kindly wind up, the time is up.
Okay, I would like to conclude. Consent means an unequivocal voluntary agreement when the person by words, gestures, expressions in a non-verbal or verbal gives their willingness to participate in that specific event. Thank you.
Thank you, F1. I request F2 to commence. F2, shall we commence?
Yes.
Start.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you're audible and you're visible too. Let's start.
Good evening to one and all present here. My topic is unity in diversity, accepting sexual minorities. It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. We are made for goodness. We are made for love. We are made for friendliness. We are made for togetherness. We are made for all the beautiful things that you and I know. We are made to tell the world that there are no outsiders. All are welcome. Black and white, rich and poor, young and old, male and female, gay and straight, all. We all belong to this family, this human family, God's family. Jumping on to today's topic, as we all know, in recent years, LGBT rights have improved dramatically. Equality laws are protecting LGBT people. Same-sex marriages are legalized in more than 29 nations. Increased media coverage is improving knowledge and awareness of sexual orientation. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but we have promises to keep and miles to go before we sleep, Despite major changes in laws and norms surrounding the issue of rights of LGBT people around the world, public opinion on the acceptance of homosexuality in society remains sharply divided. Many parts of the world are still lagging behind in this process. Realizing one's sexual orientation or gender identity and then sharing this information is a gradual process.
Despite legal gains, most LGBT people choose not to disclose their sexual orientation. Attitudes and mentality have to change to accept the distinct identity of individuals and respect them for who they are rather than compelling them to become who they are not. Diversity can mean many things to each of us. It is important that each definition reflects the ability to accept and celebrate each other. When we talk about sexual and gender diversity, it is important to understand the terms like sex, sexual orientation, gender diversity, gender expression. The natural identity of an individual is to be treated absolutely essential to his being. What nature gives is natural. That is called nature within. Thus, that part of personality of person has to be respected and not despised or looked down upon. The said inherent nature and the associated natural impulses in that regard are to be accepted. Non-acceptance of it by any societal norm or notion and punishment by law on some obsolete idea and idealism affects the kernel of identity of an individual. Destruction of individual identity would tantamount to crushing values of unity. Mutual respect abandons outside interference and is averse to any kind of interdiction. It is based on the percept that the individuality of an individual is recognized, accepted, and respected. The identity is pivotal to one's being. The sustenance of identity is filament of life. The identity is equivalent to divinity. No one can escape from their individuality. I am what I am, so take me as I am. Unity, not uniformity, must be our aim. We attain unity only through variety. Differences must be integrated, not annihilated. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Esther. Shall we take a 5-minute break? We resume back in 5 minutes. Nobody, we will not leave the meetings. We just off our videos and we'll back in 5 minutes.
It is 5:45 right now. We will join sharp at 5:50. Participants are to kindly note, especially the team G. Kindly be ready by 5:50.
Good evening, everybody. Can we commence now? Judges? Team code G.
Rishika, please commence.
Yeah. Judges, I would just request you to note that the team code G1 is not with us. Team code G1 is absent for the event. Team code G, should we commence?
Yes. Yes, sure. Good evening to everyone. My topic is Pandemic Within Pandemic, the Marginalized Communities. As we know, the human civilization is facing an unprecedented crisis in the form of COVID-19 pandemic, a force major event which was unforeseen by anyone and which is still beyond our control. It was in late March this month when the disease started spreading its tentacles in our country that the government had to invoke two strict laws, the Epidemic Diseases Act 1897 and the Disaster Management Act 2005, declaring this pandemic a national disaster and imposing many restrictions on the public, including a lockdown, in order to mitigate the spread of the contagion. The fundamental rights given to us under the Constitution, as in the right to move freely within the territory of India under Article 19(1)(d), and the fundamental right to practice any profession or carry on any trade, business, or occupation under Article 19(1)(g), had been curtailed in the interest of public health and safety. Movements of the people were severely curtailed, social distancing norms were imposed, and trades, businesses, schools, colleges, offices all came to a grinding halt. We have all suffered the impact of the pandemic in one way or another, but one section of our community that has borne the brunt the maximum were the marginalized communities. This pandemic has exacerbated the inequalities that already exist in our society. One of the worst manifestations of the human suffering can be seen in the migrant crisis when tens of thousands of migrant workers had to walk back on their feet hundreds and thousands of miles back to their home in the scorching sun because they were frightened, helpless, and they could not afford living in the cities where they were stranded when the lockdown was imposed. Unfortunately, many of them had to lose their lives in the process. Who can forget the unfortunate Aurangabad train incident where 14 migrant workers were mowed down by a goods train? Another community which has suffered the brunt of the pandemic are the women. As per a report by the National Legal Service Authority, there has been a sharp spike in the number of reported domestic violence incidents. According to them, there has been an increase of over 50% in the number of reported domestic violence cases since the time the lockdown was imposed. Working women have to face the double whammy of managing work from home as well as looking after the household chores, and with little or no access to maids and children spending more time at home, this is quite an uphill task. During the lockdown, we have reinvented the way in which we can continue our business or educational activities through the online mode. But even this has had an unintended consequence as it has deepened the divide between the haves and the have-nots. There are many places in rural India which do not have an access to internet connection, and there are many children from poor families who cannot afford to have electronic devices to themselves in order to access online education. In a very unfortunate incident, a 14-year-old girl in Kerala, who was the daughter of a daily wage earner, committed suicide because she was unable to access online education. Another arena where we can see how the marginalized and the poor are suffering is access to healthcare. As the public healthcare infrastructure is overburdened and the private hospitals are exorbitantly overcharging, the poor and the marginalized are left in the lurch with little or no access to healthcare. This pandemic has had a very devastating impact on the unemployment situation in our country. Many people have ended up losing their livelihood, particularly people from the agricultural and the construction sectors. As per a joint report by the Asia Development Bank and the International Labour Organization, over 4 million youth in our country have lost their jobs since the lockdown began. As we can see that the situation is precarious, but it is not just incumbent on the government, but also on we as individuals to inculcate more empathy and more sensitivity towards the poor and the marginalized, because it is these nameless, faceless people who have been working incessantly in making this world a better place for us to live in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Team Code G. I request Team Code G2 to comment. Team Code G.
Greetings to everyone present here. I'm Code G2. I'm here to talk about this minority group of people who barely constitute 7 to 8% of India's population. Today, I'm going to give my voice to the topic, Unity in Diversity, Acceptance of Sexual Minorities. When I started communicating about LGBTQ people with various people, they tend to ask me this question, but do these people really deserve to live in a society? Well, instead of asking whether or not they deserve to live in a society, the question we should ask is whether we deserve to kill them, whether we deserve to outcast them. Who gave us the authority to write the fate of a human being? In too many countries, being a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or intersex means living with daily discrimination. This could be based on your sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or sex characteristics. Today, same-sex marriage is a crime in 70 countries and can get you death in 9 countries. LGBTQ pride festivals are banned in several countries, including Russia, Saudi Arabia, Uganda, and most recently, Turkey. Hostility directed at LGBT are sometimes fueled by the government themselves. State-sponsored campaign at Chechnya led to the targeting of the gay men, some of whom have been abducted, tortured, and even killed. In Bangladesh, LGBTI activists have been hanged to death with the police and the government little interested in delivering justice to the families of the victims. In many sub-Saharan Africa, LGBTI people continue to live in a fear of being found out and attacked or even killed. Let's talk about India. On one hand, I'm really proud to belong to a country where we have this amazingly courageous women like Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi ma'am, Manika Guruswamy ma'am, many of whom who have fought for decades for LGBTQ rights. But on the other hand, when I read that on 12th July 2019, India had abstained from voting for an extension of an important UN official who reports on the violence and the discrimination of sexual minorities around the world. Let me tell you this, the barriers felt by LGBTQ in the healthcare fueled with, including the mental health issues, can have a cut short in our GDP. The United Nations program on HIV and AIDS had included in its 2016 Prevention Gap Report the Global Homophobic Climate Index, which said the homophobic laws and social norms could cost the world $119.1 billion US. And it also found the highest to be in the Asia and Pacific at $88.3 billion US. And this is only because the majority of the people think that these problems are not our problems. Well, the truth is, no matter how good we are in terms of our technology, in terms of our fashion, in terms of our art, the true character of a society is judged by how they treat the poor, the marginalized section of the society. The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We cannot be fully evolved human beings until we care about human rights and basic dignity, that all of our survival is tied with the survival of everyone. Lastly, I want you to ask yourself this question. How much have you been supportive towards these people? How have you contributed towards making your surrounding LGBTQ friendly? Because remember, upon the conduct of each, depend the fate of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Code G2. And I'll now further hand over platform to Sparsh to manage further.
Thank you, Rishika. I would request the next participant, team code H, to unmute and start presenting.
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Should I start?
H1, kindly wait. Now H will present.
Okay, sorry. Hello.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yes.
Okay. Pandemic within pandemic, marginalized communities. I completely agree with the line which our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has quoted in his speech. Every person is a soldier in this battle and also leading the battle. 2020 has been one of the worst and crucial years in the history of this decade that every country will remember. It was the worst nightmare for the world when the first victim of this treacherous disease was detected in Wuhan on December 2019. No country has been exempted from this disease, be it one of the most developed countries like USA or underdeveloped ones like Nigeria. In totality, when the pandemic began, predictions for India's future were usually termed as a recipe for disasters. Yes, you guessed it right, it is COVID-19. So to start off, I would priorly look into detail about how this pandemic is impacting our world, but at the same time, I shall be looking into the fact that there are 7.8 billion people around the world, many living in conflict-affected areas, grappling with this ongoing crisis, and also facing additional challenges too. What I have been thinking recently is that this is possibly the first truly global experience that the world is undergoing together. If you think about the huge events from the past, be it natural disasters or world wars, these were widespread but actually did not affect globally at the same time. Currently, we have approximately around 27 million cases recorded and over 8 lakh deaths around the world. In the current pandemic, the issue of the migrant workers was one of the most crucial and highlighted in the issue where millions were left unemployed and stranded without money, food, security, homesickness, and various other factors. Similarly, women are at greater risk from the health perspective and are also facing social inequality problems like child abuse, lack of security, money, health. If we look into the current scenario, nobody is addressing the special needs of the people with disability and making an effort at reaching out to them. People with disability need much more support than others in this phase of pandemic. We would fail as a human race if we do not show any human response in an equitable manner with an affirmative actions for people with disability. It has become very clear that since last 4 to 5 months, the biggest impact of the pandemic has been on the poor, migrant workers, sex workers, transgenders, women, children, and various other downtrodden communities as well. They constitute 70% of our population. On 24th of August 2020, Honorable Supreme Court of India refused an appeal for uniform national compensation for families who died in COVID-19. If the courts itself are unable to do anything for those who in this national crisis are jobless and without adequate food and shelter, then the judiciary can hardly be said at delivering justice, which indeed has miserably failed. Rather, it reflects a complete surrender to the executive, which is not just an institutional failure, but a personal failure of the judges. And therefore, the noted lawyers passed an adverse comments. Judges cannot live in ivory courts and must ensure justice to poor. Section 61 of the Disaster Management Act asserts prohibition against discrimination, and it states, while providing compensation and relief to the victims of the disaster, there shall be no discrimination on the grounds of sex, culture, religion, or descent. The preamble of the Constitution of India is known as the soul of the Constitution. And it states, justice to all, freedom of all, and equality for all. This statement is supported by trails of articles adopted in Part 3 of the Constitution of India under the heading of fundamental rights, ranging from Article 14 to Article 32. Not just Section 16 and the Constitution mentions it, but the father of our Constitution, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, principally believes that the society teaches equality, liberty, and fraternity. In the current pandemic, India's marginalized communities are disproportionately hurt due to lack or minimal access to food, shelter, employment, which have further deepened stark inequalities. No, so I would like to conclude this by asking you all a small question: that why are we still facing the problem of marginalism in our societies, whereas COVID-19 itself does not discriminate among rich or poor?
Please wind up. Your time is up.
Rich or poor, caste, sex, gender. Why can't we make a small change in ourselves and fight this battle together? Thank you.
Thank you. Judges, that was Team Code H. Now I request Team Code H1 to unmute and start presenting.
Okay.
You're muted.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Respected dignitaries and my dear co-participants, a very warm good evening to one and all. Without further ado, I would like to share my views on the topic that has been assigned to me. Today, I will be sharing my views on the topic as to whether consensual sex among adults might amount to rape. It is popularly said that rape is the only crime in the world where the victim becomes the accused. And even though we have had plethora of definitions defining and redefining the concept, today I'm going to talk about that from a layman's point of view. And I would say rape is a forceful, unlawful sexual intercourse happening against the person, against that person's will. And therefore, that brings us to the heart of the concept of rape, namely the concept of consent. And therefore, we can definitely state that the concept of consent is something which ensures that the victim is not being giving her consent when this offense of rape is being committed against her. And therefore, keeping these things aside, we need to analyze, we need to understand as to whether consensual sex amounts to rape, and or rather we simply put, we need to understand or observe as to how consensual sex can be classified to be included within the ambit of rape. And in order to understand that, we need to just look into the different case laws, the different judgments that has been pronounced by our courts over the years in our country. We have had numerous instances wherein the Apex Court had time and again ruled out the fact that consensual sex will not amount to rape. We have had the famously infamous case, the doctor's case, wherein the courts had claimed that when the two couples, maybe the partners, are engaging in living relationship with each other, and maybe, the promise of marriage would have been given, and at a later point of time, the promise of marriage would have been broken, it might not amount to rape. Maybe they would have engaged in consensual sex, but it cannot be classified to be rape. We again had the same judgment being reiterated in a further case, where it was stated that just because of the fact that the promise of marriage wasn't given, it cannot be classified as consensual. It cannot be classified as rape. It is definitely consensual sex, but it cannot be classified as rape. And therefore, we can definitely state something. We can definitely be sure of a particular fact that consensual sex per se will not amount to rape because there lies an ambit of consent. But again, that makes this question as to what happens when, suppose the consent is being given, but it can further be classified as rape. And that is because of the fiduciary relationships. There are many fiduciary relationships which can be misused. Maybe it is the medical power of the doctor being misused against a patient. It is the police power of the police officials which has resulted in custodial rapes happening all over the nation. It can be statutory rape, wherein the age of the minor can be misused. It can even be those instances wherein women can be drugged and they can be led to an unconscious state because of the fact of which, rape would have been committed. But these instances wherein consent has been given cannot be said to be consensual sex, because here the small silver lining between consent and free consent needs to be understood. And therefore we can state that consensual sex per se will not amount to rape if the consent is not free. But sadly, or rather shockingly, India is presently witnessing an uprising situation wherein we have a number of false prosecution cases being filed by women in courts. just because they have some kind of vengeance or maybe personal vendetta against men because of the fact that they would have broken the promise of marriage that would have been given against them. And that is the situation, or that is the issue which we need to address. Because today, in this present situation, it is the need of the hour for us to analyze and understand that it is our duty to ensure that the standard of proof when it comes to false prosecution cases is being raised so that no woman will be coming up with false cases. Moreover, it is high time that we bring about changes in our legislations, because we have a beautiful piece of legislation, and this beautiful piece of legislation and the special legal provisions that has been given to our women to protect their dignity and their honor should not be misused. Because as it is said, there is a cost of telling the lies, and the cost of telling the lies is in not believing the truth. Because when these lies are being continuously stated, what happens is the innocent victim men, it is actually all these suggestions which I had actually put forward, the reason as to why we need to bring about these kind of changes is because of the fact that simultaneously as we are protecting the innocent men, we are also empowering genuine legislations, genuine case laws. Because sadly in our country, we have reached a melting point where it has become actually impossible for us to distinguish between genuine and non-genuine cases because of the large number of false prosecution cases that become before the court now and then. Because, even if it is a consensual sex case, maybe the partners might have engaged themselves in consensual sex, but if a woman claims that she has been raped, the whole society believes her. And sadly, the irony lies in the fact that by virtue of section 228A of the Indian Penal Code, the identity of the victim, even if she is lying, can be protected. Any person who spurts out a name can be punished. But what about the man? If he is found to be innocent towards the end of the case, what happens to him? The fourth estate would have already done the damage. The damage would have already been irreparable. It would not only be his image, but also the image of his family too, which would have been tarnished. So, keeping all these things in mind, what I would like to state is that it is high time for us to understand that it is the need of the hour.
Wind up.
Yeah, okay. So, I would like to conclude by stating that we need to remember as a society that a man's honor is equally important as a woman's dignity. And if it is a consensual sex out of, mutual love, respect, we need to appreciate it and not just blame the man, because not all men are rapists and not all women are victims. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I now request H2, team code H2, to unmute and start presenting.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Good evening to one and all present here. My topic is unity in diversity, acceptance of sexual minorities. The Almighty, in a playful manner, created the universe and the beings to walk the earth. When he created man and woman, he specified the sexual orientation of both the sexes. But in certain cases, he did not. But all we know is about Adam and Eve and nothing about Ruth and Naomi, who varied significantly from normative gender roles. God's creation of gender is a gigantic rainbow of variation and not a black and white conformity with sex. For a long time, we believed that there are only two sexual preferences and any deviation was considered as derogatory and hence prohibitory. Most of us carelessly overlooked the reality. Our country has always been liberal when it comes to sexuality, as enshrined in our scriptures and mythologies, where even Shikandi was accepted by all. Sexuality did not have such a rigid framework, as even Lord Vishnu is said to transform to Mohini, and the consequent coupling of Shiva and Mohini gives us the birth of Ayyappa. Sexuality, its water-like nature, irrespective of the labels we place upon them today, were boldly celebrated in ancient temples, sculptures, and paintings. And this in itself is proof that ancient India was aware and understanding of this creation of nature. With the advent of the British Empire, it led to the legalized discrimination of sexual minorities by incorporation of Section 377 into the Indian Penal Code. Some sections of the society viewed LGBTs as an aberration and as unwelcomed into the normal scheme of things. They were bullied, tortured, and sometimes even murdered. Later, with the advent of international laws like the UDHR and UN Human Rights Committees, the discrimination against LGBTs were considered just as unlawful as discrimination against people based on their caste, religion, or color. But acceptance is something that should come from within each individual, and this takes time. A classic example of the perils and tribulations faced by a homosexual is the curious case of the Indian prince Manvendra Singh of Rajpipla in Gujarat. The pride and honor of royalty covered his sexual orientation, and this made him to marry a princess. The marriage only lasted for a year, and at the end of it, he boldly declared his sexuality. Acceptance came in the way of remarriage to Mr. Richardson at USA. The most interesting and wholesome part about this is that the royal family accepted them, and Mr. Richardson was honored with the title of Duke of Hanumanteshwar. Manvendra Singh is one of the pioneers in LGBTQ rights in India as well as the global forums. So our country has also eventually started accepting them. And when the society changed, law changed. Section 377 was repealed in 2018. Yet, even though same-sex marriages are legal in some countries, it is still not, the idea of it has not been ripened in our society, and that has led to movements like the marriage project. On a peripheral view of the issue of sexuality, we mostly give preference to sexual preferences and related issues. But on a deeper pondering, we can understand that the real concerns are related to their economic upbringing and social acceptance. In my opinion, even though times are way better than before, it is still necessary to normalize sexual minorities and their preferences. This should start at the school level, through sex education, which should include awareness material emphasizing on the unity or emphasizing that the unity of the society can be achieved only if those who are sexually diverse are also made part of the beautiful bouquet of human beings. I am happy that at least now there are whole movies and series talking about people who are gay, lesbians, or asexuals, and how all of that is completely normal. Wonderful moments like providing jobs to transgenders by the Kochi Metro, giving them a platform to express their views and concerns, or just simple steps like coming out to your family about your sexuality, which would not have been possible earlier, is possible now. And that in itself is a revolution. So to put it in the right perspective, different doesn't necessarily mean wrong. So let's all accept and respect the LGBTQ community and make our so often used mantra, unity in diversity, really meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would now request team code J, if he has been entered. Dhruvi, is team code J?
Oh, it's supposed to be I right now, right?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I. Team code I. Team code I, can you please unmute yourself and start presenting?
Sparsh, there are two A1s. Please get that corrected. It's corrected?
Yes, ma'am, it's corrected now.
Okay, I've sent you the list. Just check it out.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, am I audible?
Are you team code I?
Hello.
Hello, yes, you're audible. Are you team code I?
May I begin?
Are you team code I? Just please confirm that and then
Yes,
we can begin.
yes. His name is Shikhar.
Yes, okay. Please continue.
Hello.
Team code
Hello.
I? Yes, you're audible. Please start presenting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, may I begin?
No, wait.
Okay, thank you. So my topic is pandemic within pandemic, the marginal societies.
Continue.
My topic pandemic, the marginalized societies. I would like to begin with the name that ये गजब नशा है सरकार का, जमी गरीबी गई, कानून साहूरों ने बनाए. Translate: this is a unique way of lawmaking. The government, land is by the poor, rules are made by the rich. My topic is pandemic within pandemic, marginalized societies, and talk about those people who suffered the most during this pandemic, who earn spend on a hourly basis, laborers, young housemaids, sex workers, transgender workers, dancers, etc. These people whose income depends on day work, they have no savings, no provident funds, no deposit, etc. to have to maintain themselves has suffered a lot last 8 during this lockdown. The economic lockdown in a certain way has relentlessly provided space for these Indian societies to get worse to worsen. What happened with them that the shutting down of industries provided constant employment with labor have shut down. The economy of the country has come to such a level that the GDP is from -24. In this condition, the middle class, working class are not getting jobs. Think of the marginal societies, the migrants, the laborers. Their kind of job seeking, job employment has gone to such a downturn. There's no way for them to earn money. What happened in marginal societies has been ignored by both government and national media. There has been no scheme, no agendas, no rules to provide basic employment. Neither the wrath of pandemic on the marginal societies is being reprinted by national media. There have no dips, no news coming on international media highlight the wrath of pandemic on marginal societies. Deccan Herald, in edition of September, stated that BP ration shops have been reported to be shown in the law. The people ration shop provide ration to the poverty like people who cannot afford regular rations at regular price, so they get customized or any subsidized ration from the house. And these have been shut in lockdown. So these BPL, they're not getting employment, they're not getting money. As well, BPL should also been shut. What will they do? They can also say the capital Delhi itself, 17 out of 37 Russian shops had yet not opened for a single day in the last 9 months. This is the nation in the capital. Think about more area country. Further, talking about medical facilities of these marginal societies, medical facilities in the government hospital to all, they're not to the amount with COVID-19 pandemic be treated. And fees taken by private hospitals which can afford these managed people. So both the cases, they are the wheel of the moon who are constantly stuck in wind, getting harassed from the side. Neither they go to government hospital, nor they can afford private hospitals. No opportunity to get medical facilities. And most importantly, that the 6.7% total population in India resides below poverty line. And these are the most frequently collected people. Their living standards, height, their surroundings are very hygienic, very vulnerable to diseases, pandemics, and yet they are one who have the least medical facilities. It is important to bring one more thing to the concern these battles, that all poor are not necessarily marginalized, but also marginalized are necessarily poor. Because they are not economically marginalized, they are socially marginalized. The people not accepted in the mainstream society. They are the people who only talk and get in contact when you need things. You don't invite labor for it to in lunch and dinner. Only contact labor to work with them. When you have work, when you have the record of them. And when there is no requirement, there is economic lockdown, there is no who will do this labor. They have no one to talk to, no one to take care of them. This is what the majorities have. They are the poorest of poor, not on economic, on social, on physical, on psychological, on every front they have tried. The marginal societies cases have not been voted. There have 159 suicides of migrated laborers have got unwritten in any media. There have been no debate that why 115 reported suicide of migrant laborers. That has gone unvoted. There have been no news, no debates, no awareness of people. Society as a whole is completely ignorant of the fact that the migrant laborers are the most in lockdown. Through this elocution, through this debate, I want to promote the government side to the government of the country that they should rules, they should schemes for marginal society. After 1 year where the economy has come to -20%, it is laborers who will help us to get it promoted. It is those laborers who we need to take care of. The middle class already saying the labor should not suffer. They are the one who need the most help. Government should do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I request team code I1 to unmute and start.
Sparsh, they should be visible. The video should be on.
Yes, ma'am.
I too, right? Excuse me.
Yes.
No. I won, no?
I won.
I too.
No. I too. I won.
Hello. Yeah, I am I1.
Please give your names. First, please check with that list which I've given you.
Yes, ma'am. I won. Vipasha, right?
Yes. I'm I1.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Kindly
So
start.
can I start? Okay. In ancient Rome, rape was only a crime against a virgin daughter of a tax-paying father. In the state of Guinea, rape with fraud and persuasion is not a crime. In Alabama, it's just a misdemeanor. And in our very own country, India, if you get married, you get the license of making your wife afraid of your lust every night. These concepts all across the globe tells us that how women are treated as a chattel of men and how their chastity lies with their husbands or with their fathers. Good evening to everyone and my dear friends. Today, I will be sharing my views on how and when consensual sex between adults would be treated as rape. So, let us grab three words very important from the topic that are adult, rape, and the most crucial one, consent. Adults are those who are 18 plus, and obviously they can be either male, female, or from the third gender. Rape in laws is defined as a non-consensual sexual intercourse that is done either by force, threat of injury, or by duress. When it comes about consent, it is defined in our law, but it is highly vague and is often confused with either submission or with acquiescence, which is just an agreement under duress. So if a girl says that nothing under my weight and the act still continues, does the woman give consent to it? Maybe prima facie, but that is not consent, that is just submission, and a sexual activity without consent would be termed as rape only. You would be shocked to know that when India witnessed a brutal gang rape case known as Vinbhaya gang rape case, what the rapist said, the rapist had the audacity to come in the mic and say that she got murdered because she resisted. So, if a girl says a feeble no, she would be murdered by the rapist. And the feeble no would be taken as a yes or a consent by the judges sitting in the court. The onus of sexual assault, of proving it, always has remained as a burden in a woman's shoulder only. A men's mentality has that much sexualized or objectified women that they have reasons that I committed rape because from the four walls of your corporate world to the house where marital rape happens. In marital rape, husband tells their wife that look who the boss is here. In your professional field, your boss may threaten you with dire consequences if you do not submit herself to him. Does it amount to consent? No, it is acquiescence or either submission, which is agreement under duress. It is true that laws are highly misused in India and across the world too, but we cannot say that those laws would be terminated because some women are coming and misusing it. Because if you are doing that in a country like India, where millions of rape cases go unreported, you are being unjust and weakening the cause of the women. It's highly unfair. Also, I would like to narrate a case from the capital of India, that is Delhi. In Delhi, a case happened where a woman was sexually assaulting or raping a boy, and the boy later murdered that woman. The boy said that she was threatening of her rape charges. The consent which was given by boy wasn't actually consent. It was submission. And hence, these are the cases where rape happens. It's not consent, it's not cheating, it's just rape. In a very striking move in Spain, Spain laws say that consent needs to be defined and it shouldn't be left on the whims and fancies of our judges. It is the need of an hour that we rise up and wake up for a call of getting a definite or a concrete definition of consent in our law. We need virgin wives as our women. We need virgin wives for marriage, but we fail to recognize that intention or the purpose or a false promise to marriage amounts to rape. You call it cheating? No, that's rape because there the consent isn't involved.
Thank you. Kindly.
As a society, we need to come forward. Thank you. Yeah. I would be winding up by a few lines. My body is not a token, not a prize. It's not yours to take. It's mine to give. Do not define me with your Persian lies or induction. This is not any entitlement.
You've exceeded your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I too, kindly unmute yourself and start presenting.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. My topic is unity in diversity, acceptance of sexual minority. Unity and diversity is the mutual understanding between a group of individual or people with multitude of differences in terms of culture, language, sex, etc. These are not looked upon on the basis of conflict. It shall look upon on the basis of variety that enriches our society and the nation as a whole. So, what does sexual minority means? Sexual minority is a group of people whose sexual identity or practice which is different from the majority of the surrounding of the society. Of course, we know about this is because of the recent 2018 judgment, Navjot Singh Johar versus Union of India. In this case, Section 377 had made unconstitutional, and which means it stated that decriminalizing the consensual sex between adults, including homosexuals. And also in Nas Foundation versus Government of NCT of Delhi, it was held that it shall not treat as a crime. The consensual sex between adults shall not be treated as a crime. If it does, then it is violating the fundamental rights. Now we look upon as the history of sexual minority in India, especially the transgender community. Transgender is a person whose sex does not match with the sex attained at the time of the birth. Back then, transgender were treated much more respectful way. Especially in Hindu religion, they consider their presence in certain ceremonies considered as a blessing. Even in Mughal period, also they consider as a trustworthy, and in royal courts, they plays an important role. British were kind of disturbed at the time where the Hijra's presence in royal court. Therefore, in 1861, they came up with a law criminalizing the sexual activity, including the homosexual and nature of against the nature. The major issue they face today is the health issue. The health care has to be properly ensured that each and every person in the society is getting the proper and adequate care. But here it is not happening. They are prone to mental and physical illness. Mental illness, if we take physical illness first, it is that they are prone to STDs like AIDS, HIV, etc. The main reason for this is reusing of needles and engaging in sexual work. And also in SRS, sexual reassignment surgery, they're not getting proper assessment or proper psychiatric opinion about their surgery, especially in our country. They are the victim of sexually and physically abused victims by this so-called normal community. Now we take the mental illness. They're prone to discrimination from their childhood to their adulthood. Also the parental rejection, which lead them to poverty and suicidal tendency, etc. And to overcome this sorrow, they've been addicted to substance abuse. India is a country which having a wide variety of culture, caste, religion, etc. In also in article, this is what make our country different from all others. In Article 14 of our Indian Constitution states that equal protection to under law, equal protection under law, and it also states that it shall protect every person against discrimination on the basis of sex, caste, religion. And Article 21 of the Constitution also states right to equality. Right to equality. In the case of Bantu Mukti Morcha versus Union of India, it states that right to life, which also include right to life with dignity. And in the case of State of Punjab versus MC Chawla case, it states that right to life also guaranteed right to adequate medical care. Our constitution are providing all the adequate facility for the sexual community, sexual minority. So still we are lacking. I personally believe it have to overcome the medical care, have to overcome the barriers in the medical care. And I conclude my speech by quoting a sentence by a German thinker, John Wolfgang, stated that I am what I am, so take me as what I am. Then only we can live in this country of diversity with unity. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I request team code J to unmute and start presenting.
Shall I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. Greetings to everyone present here. My code is J. I want your attention to a very famous phrase that we all have heard in this lockdown, or to say in this pandemic. We are all in this together. Hear this referring to the coronavirus pandemic. But the question is that are we really in this together? They say they present the virus as some great equalizer in our society, the society which is inherently so unequal. They say that the virus does not discriminate between the haves and the have-nots, the upper caste and the lower caste, the upper class and the lower class. But if we look away for a moment from this rhetoric to the reality at the ground and analyze the situation, we will be in a better position to answer the question that are we really in this together? Let me take you back to an incident that happened on 8th of May. While we were all sleeping at 5:20 a.m. in the morning, there were 16 other people who were sleeping as well, not in the comfort of their homes or in the bed like us. They were sleeping on railway tracks, not because they were bored and they wanted to do some adventurous things. They slept there because they had no other choice left. They slept not to wake up again. They were crushed down to death by the goods train, those 16 migrant laborers. If this does not clench your heart, let me take you to an incident that happened on 28th of May. A video surfaced on the social media which showed that a toddler was trying to wake up his mother. Now, what's the new deal about a toddler trying to wake up his mother? But the problem lies that the woman was dead. She had not eaten anything for the last 4 days. Why? No, she was not on diet. She did not have the privilege to eat anything. She was trying to catch up a train that was run for migrant laborers. A picture was circulated in the media where children were seen of the Musahar community in Varanasi were seen eating grass. They were not eating grass because they wanted to try some cuisine, as we did in our lockdown. They were eating grass because they did not have any other choice. They did not have the food. Is this the society? Is this the social democracy that we have created after 73 years of independence? Is this the society that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar dreamt of while giving us the political democracy that we have today? Well, for sure, no. While it is very easy to sit in our cocoon middle class privileges and post these things that we are all in this together, and not to look at the situation on the ground. I want to quote Dr. Upendra Bakshi here when he said that for every marginalized section out there, there is the privileged section which is responsible. Why? Because we both are the product of the same societal force. We are living in the society. It's just that the societal force is working for us and not for them. And then whose responsibility is to look after them? It is our collective responsibility to look after them, to ask our government the question that our policies, are they framed with the need to look after them? Have you seen any package announced for the sex workers? Social distancing norms that are placed in the country did not allow them to have their own business. What happened to them? Have we asked this question to ourselves? No, because it's very difficult to remove our glasses of privileges. While I want to say that we need to take the Gandhian approach and form our policies that take the bottom-up approach and keep in mind the needs of these population, these marginalized sections, because they are the ones who need us most. And if our policies are framed in the way that keep in mind their needs, then we can obviously address the needs of the general population. I so wish that I could say that we were all in this together, but my conscience does not allow me to say that. At the back of my mind, I know that 12-year girl who walked down 100 kilometers on foot just to die of exhaustion, 50 kilometers away from her home, while I'm sitting in my room. Isn't it our responsibility to share our privileges a little bit? I hope and I want to end this on the note that we should share our privilege and we should ask our government to form policies in a better way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would now request team code J1 to unmute and start presenting.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good evening, dignitaries. I am Shivam Kumar, representing code J1. I'm here to present a topic named Can Consensual Sex Be Termed as Rape? This is a very great topic to be conveyed upon because in the modern era, the women are taking taking the undue advantage of Section 375. So let us talk about what is Section 375. Section 375 is a man is said to commit a rape if he penetrates his penis, any part of the body or any object to any extent into the vagina, urethra or anus of a woman, or makes her to do so with him or any other person, firstly against her will, secondly without her consent, third without her consent, when her consent has been put under any coercion, threat or death, or hurt, fourthly, with her consent, when the man knows that her husband, the man is not her husband, and she is believed to another man whom she is believed that she is lawfully married to. Fifthly, with her consent, when at the time of giving consent by the reason of unsoundness or intoxication administered to her personally or through any other person. Sixthly, with or without consent, when she is under 16 years of age. So, penetration is sufficient to constitute the sexual intercourse necessary to offense of rape. Now, we should see about what is consent. Consent is clearly defined voluntary communication that woman gives for a certain sexual act. Marital rape is an exception to giving consent as it is not crime under the Indian Penal Code as long as the woman is above 18 years of age. Consent can be considered as free consent according to Section 14 of the Act if there is no existence of coercion, undue influence, or fraud or mistake. So, what is the punishment of rape? Except the aggravated conditions, the punishment for rape is 7 years that can be extended up to imprisonment of life. And under the aggravated conditions, it can be extended up to, it can minimum be of 10 years, and that can be extended up to life imprisonment, and that can be imprisonment and also be liable to fine. So, in March 2013, a parliamentary committee endorsed a government decision as not to treat marital rape as sexual offense in recent promulgated anti-rape laws. The reason is that it would destroy the institution of marriage. Secondary, the marriage could fabricate, the woman could fabricate the laws for her personal advantages, as well as the woman could have the other recourse to these laws under Section 498 of IPC. The parliament received as much as 90 suggestions from different individuals, human bodies, states, and human territories. Incidentally, only 5 states and union territories, that is Gujarat, Mizoram, Lakshadweep, Puducherry, and Dadra and Nagar Haveli, gave their views. The rest goes silent. However, in the case of Muralidhar Sonar versus State of Maharashtra, a bench of Justice A.K. Siri and S. Abdul Nazir contended that when living partners are living together out of love and having consensual sex under the promise of marriage, and then the woman was allowed to initiate, and then the woman could not be allowed to initiate criminal proceeding for rape in case of breakdown of marriage. It is said that such cases should be that in such cases the court should very carefully examine whether the complainant had actually wanted to marry the victim or have malevolent intention, or made it for the lust, or later false. It should fall under the ambit of cheating and deception and not rape. So, when the consensual sex can be treated as rape, having a consensual sex with a woman who is intoxicated or unconscious and she is not able to give her consent can.
Your time's up. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, judges, we have the last participant for the day, J2. I request you to kindly unmute yourself and start presenting.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. So, good evening to all. So, the topic of mine is acceptance of sexual minorities. Now, acceptance is very much important for a human personality. If you are not accepted by your family, society, then what is your dignity? But unfortunately, in our country, even in all over the world, the acceptance of these sexual minorities is very less. Now, who are sexual minority? There is one term, heteronormativity. It means that heterosexuality is over or is more oftenly used or practiced as comparison to homosexuality. Such kind of superiority which we can feel in racial superiority, which we can compare. So this kind of heterosexuality in the whole of the world discriminate homosexuals. In our country, the condition is very much pathetic regarding LGBT, especially transgender. Now, in India, we have different kind of culture, different kind of religion, different languages. We have accepted all kind of things. But when it talks about sexual orientation, sexual differentiation, then our thinking become otherwise. Why? Because in a Bible we know there is a concept of Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. In Quran also we have seen that they have clearly prohibited such kind of homosexuality. But later on in modern time we have seen that Supreme Court of India and in a world also they have accepted homosexuality in such kind of relation. And they have also said that whatever exists in this nature, it cannot be unnatural, whether it is sodomy, whether it is homosexuality, whether it is bisexuality, it all are, whatever thing is present in nature, it is natural. So must be accepted. There is one इश्क नहीं आसान बस इतना समझ लीजिए, आग का दरिया डूब के जाना है. Love is not easy. Just think it is like a river of fire and you have to sink through it. It is very much correct for these LGBT people because they are not having right to love each other. Now, Supreme Court has given in India, they have given the right of living together. They have been recognized. But the issue is that the other rights, like right of marriage, they have not been given. The right of adoption, the right of surrogacy, the new bill which we have seen, the transgender bill, that bill itself is against the judgment of NALSA. So the transgender community in southern part, they have given their strong resentment against the bill as well. In international regime, we have seen in UDHR, they clearly say that all persons are born free and equal in dignity and rights. But in homosexual people, in these sexual minorities, they are not being recognized. Why? Because they don't have right of marriage. They don't have right to form family. And we have seen that even though in our neighbor country, in Nepal, they have recognized the right to marriage, but in our country, it is not given so. Now, why I'm emphasizing the right to marriage? Because if two lesbians are living in a live-in relationship, so they don't have such rights and duties among each other if they are being married. So giving a marital status is not there. It is not like our statute is giving. It is their human rights. It is their natural rights, and natural rights cannot be denied and cannot be taken away. Our constitution, the very word of constitution which talks about liberty of faith, belief and expression, equality of opportunity and status, and right to life, these sacred word of the constitution give the right of dignity to all the people regardless of sex. And the judicial pronouncement clearly says that sex includes sexual orientation, and if there is any kind of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, then automatically it is a discrimination on the basis of sex. Now, other point is that we have seen that in various cases, parents are doing some kind of medical treatment because they consider being LGBT a kind of disease, because society does not have such kind of awareness. Now whose duty is? Because we have no representation of LGBT community in judiciary.
Thank you. Thank you. Your time's up.
Lok Sabha, in the legislative assembly, so they have no representation. So the government is not looking for them. In this lockdown, the most. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. With that, we come to the end of the competition. It has been rather a long day, and we know that our judges need to be somewhere from Canada, and of course the judges from India who have been with us since the morning session definitely are tired. With no further delay, I would now like to call Rishika to quickly introduce all of our judges, and then after each introduction, we would love to hear from you all, your feedback, your valuable advice for all the participants who have been waiting for this very moment. Rishika, please start with Mrs. Coutinho.
Thank you, Sparsh. I cherish this opportunity to introduce Mrs. Asima Kazi Coutinho, an indigenous lady with positivity and confident personality. Since last 10 years, ma'am is a member of Toronto District School Board. Mrs. Coutinho is an educator who teaches kindergarten to 8th grade students in various schools across TDSB. Ma'am is passionate about teaching STEM. She is a lead teacher and teacher librarian, along with mental health and well-being coach, as well as uses CRRP, cultural relevant responsive pedagogy. Mrs. Coutinho has specialty in KG English as a second language, ethical leadership from York University, Toronto. Ma'am was born, brought up, and educated in Mumbai. Interestingly, she was a student of our beloved principal, Dr. Nilima Chandiramani, ma'am. Prior to settling in Canada, ma'am has gained a lot of experience in Dubai for 8 years in a Montessori school. Ma'am, in her summer breaks, volunteered as a reading mentor in Bhutan Canada Foundation and Indonesia through Muslim charity organization for the child education. That is not it. Ma'am has also keen interest in art, music, dance, drama, and environmental education, and the list goes on. She has also worked with Dr. Salim Ali, a noted ornithologist of India. To conclude, in own words of Mrs. Coutinho, education is a remarkable tool. It should always bring happiness, opportunity, and curiosity. If you give, if you learn, teach. With your presence, ma'am, we are sure you have walked the talk, and it's such a pleasure to have with you as today. Thank you so much, ma'am. I request Parsh to introduce Brenden, sir.
Before that, Asima ma'am, please unmute yourself and share your valuable feedback with the students. Because I know, ma'am, you have to be somewhere, so I just want to free you soon.
Okay, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am, we can. Slightly lower, but we can hear you, of course.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I hope all the participants are good luck. I'm very touched with some of the examples that were cited in this event. I'm truly blessed to be a student of Ms. Chandiramani, and I carry her love and passion with me in my career. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, madam. Now I take this unique opportunity to introduce Miss Kathi. Very rarely do we come across a person who not only loves to learn, but also loves to teach. And Kathi Lewis is one such person. She has been teaching for over 10 years with the Toronto District School Board. She holds a BA in English and Criminology, B.Ed in English and Law from York University. Additionally, she is also qualified specialist in English and leadership. Ma'am is currently completing her MEd in Social Justice Education at OISE. Ma'am is the curriculum leader for equity, student engagement and achievement at Scarborough Center for Alternative Studies. Driven by the urgent need for African history to be embedded in the curriculum, she has co-planned with educators, administrators, professional, community partners and leaders, and advocates and designed implementing classrooms for professional development workshops in support of the Black student empowerment, leadership, and achievement. Truly, Kathi ma'am is so kind that she has not only just made a mark of herself, but encourages and recognizes talents that are unfortunately unsung. She is the co-founder of Revealing Magazine, which showcases Black excellence in all its forms and capacities. It is the first magazine to be available in the Android and Apple Store. Ma'am, we need more people like you in the world. We are elated to have you here. You are surely an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you so much. So I first want to say thank you to Ms. Chandiramani for this opportunity. It's such a blessing and such an honor to share in this moment. The wealth of information and the knowledge that you all or all participants brought forward, it is so amazing. Well done to everyone. It's really a great opportunity for me, and I've learned so much. So thank you so much again. And I look forward to participating in more events like this. Again, a wealth of information. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. I would now take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Brenden Holker. Brenden Holker is an elementary school teacher who has been working for the last 14 years at inner city schools in Toronto. Teachers have the ability to change the world by molding the future that is entrusted in their very valuable hands. And Sir is definitely one of those teachers. While teaching, Mr. Holker always keeps his focus on human rights and altruism. In 2013, his grade A class raised thousands of dollars for Plan Canada International, a charity focused on helping developing economies in a sustainable manner. Being raised by immigrants in one of the most multicultural cities in the world has led to Sir's passionate nature of diversity and social justice. Little history, Sir, his own family came to Canada because Catholics were not granted the same opportunities as Protestants in the Northern Ireland. Sir is a proud member of the LGBTQ community and works for creating a world where all of these diverse and divisive things don't matter. Sir has instilled this love for diversity in his students successfully. When Sir isn't teaching, he loves to live his life to the fullest by meeting new people and learning about their life and culture. I'm hoping that today Sir had this kind of fun by listening to all these wonderful speakers who have the potential to make this place a better, make this world a better place to live in. Thank you so much, Sir, for joining us today and gracing this occasion. I may now request you, Sir, to please address all the students.
I just want to thank everyone for this opportunity. It was really great. A little early in the morning for me, but to be talking about such heavy subjects. But I think the most interesting thing I'm taking away from this is, like, often people would say to me about in South Asia and stuff that people aren't talking about these things or doing stuff about this. So it's interesting to see. But the one thing I got from a couple of the people speaking is, like, when you hear things about, like, oh, they're doing such great things in certain places, sometimes when you go there, it's not the way it seems. Like, in Canada, as progressive as we are with all this stuff, it's very predominant in the cosmopolitans like Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. But there are lots of areas of Canada where we're still dealing with trans rights, LGBT, race, sexual orientation, everything. So I just want you to know that it's not always the way you think it is. And to keep on trucking and fighting out there.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sir. I would now request Rishika Arora to introduce Adhiraj Harish, Sir.
Thank you, Sparsh. I'm gratified to introduce a personality who has made a mark of himself in the field of advocacy. Mr. Adhiraj Harish has started his practicing career as DM Harish and Co. since 2011. So holds a various degrees such as DMS, LLB, LLM from University of Mumbai. So his education is not restricted to India only. Sir, I also acquired several courses like International Business and Marketing from University of California. Also intellectual property rights from the World of Intellectual Property Organization. Adhiraj Sir's predominant area of practice is not just real estate, along with practice is real estate along with wills and succession. Besides, Sir also practices with international investment under the Foreign Exchange Management Act. Sir has co-authored a paper on human rights and environmental law violation by the companies and represented same at the National Seminar on Cooperative Justice organized by the Indian Institute of Cooperative Affairs. Mr. Adhiraj Harish is currently an independent director of Future Consumer Limited and Advani Hotels and Resorts Limited. Sir is also a member of Governing Council of Hyderabad Sindh National Collegiate Board, which runs about 25 educational institutes and also has about 45,000 students. We are extremely delighted with your presence, sir. Thank you so much. Kindly grace us with your wisdom words.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for the opportunity. I would like to congratulate Principal Dr. Chandiramani, as well as the faculty and the team of Nari Gursahani Law College, and all of you on the success of this competition. All of the participants, all of you have done extremely well today, and it's been really challenging for us to judge and to score all of you, because it's really been close, and all of you have done extremely well. We've learned so much today. We've heard so much about the scenario in different parts of the world, in India, and so many of your suggestions have been great. And we just hope that even the government takes note of these suggestions and really acts upon it. So I wish you all the best. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Now I take the opportunity to introduce Rishika Harish, ma'am. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce Ms. Rishika Harish, an advocate who has the highest spirit and love for her profession. Ma'am has completed her bachelor's degree of economics and physiology from New York University and LLB from Government Law College, Mumbai University. Advocate Rishika started practicing in Bombay High Court since 2014. Ma'am has a wide range of civil commercial matters, along with arbitration laws, cooperative laws, securities laws, and a list goes on. Advocate Rishika appears regularly before many esteemed tribunals of India, such as Securities Appellate Tribunal, National Company Law Tribunal, domestic and international arbitrations. Ma'am has also moved to Supreme Court of India and Bombay High Court for many public interest litigations. Moreover, Ma'am has been a massive part in relation to development of metro car shed at Array Milk Colony and construction of coastal roads in Mumbai. We are all into admiration with your company in this event, ma'am. Hope we would take some of your essence along with us. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me on here. And I must say that having this competition digitally ended up working out well. It's broken so many barriers. We have people here from Canada and participants here from all over the country. And it was really great to learn from each and every one of you and to hear what you had to say on these interesting topics. And it is clear that everyone put in a lot of effort into preparing their pieces and made it a little bit more difficult for us to judge. So great job. And I hope that the students continue to remain inspired and to keep participating in such events. All the best.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
ma'am.
so much, ma'am. With that, we have come to the end of the competition. Thank you to all the participants for being so patient and staying with us till the very end. And many, many thanks to the judges for being there, for sparing the time and judging all of our participants. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I also would like to thank the team from HR College for helping us during this entire time, and the principal of HR College for letting us have this platform. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all the judges and all the participants. I was just thinking whether we could declare the result, but this is not possible as I have to get the result from all the 5 judges. Once it is done, I will declare it, I think, by tomorrow. So once again, a big thank you to one and all. I hope it was a good learning experience for everyone. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Thank you so much. Dhruvi, we can end the meeting.
Dhruvi, thank you very much to you and to the entire team and to the principal of HR College. Please convey our thanks, our heartfelt gratitude to all of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Dhruvi.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.